The man tells her to never try to leave him because she broke him from the inside and thought that she could escape calmly, and he asks her about it. However, the girl assures his lordship that this is not so. The man objects and assures that she should call him by his name and then touches her hair. The main character saw that under his black strands of hair, his red eyes were shining so brightly that it seemed they were about to swallow her up, and this made her unable to help. And the sharp howl of the wind seemed to begin to move away, creating the feeling that in this place there was no one left in the whole world. Only the two of them remained. The girl saw that he, like a hungry beast, approached her face with his lips, and she suddenly felt a sharp pain from which she screamed loudly. The main character, while reading the book, thought that the writing skills of this author were simply incredible because his strong hand wrapped around her waist, and she realized that she had been waiting for this moment for a very long time. Suddenly, a maid comes into the room and addresses the mistress and says that a guest from the imperial palace has come to her. Hearing this, the girl was surprised and then quickly closed the book. The young lady was a little upset because at such an important moment, she could not read what happened next, and then went to meet the guest. The girl with red hair says that her name is Klitsia. She lives in the quiet and peaceful estate of Shukrim and is the only daughter of the Viscount Majorino. The main character is the founder of the Northern Duchy Research Center at Shukrim Academy, and in other words, she is a fan of novels featuring the Duke of the North. And as dear fans have already guessed, her main hobby is reading these novels, especially those specializing in studying the profile of the Duke, and her dream is to marry the Duke of the North. Thus, every day of the main character passes very peacefully and richly because she dreamed that her honeymoon should definitely be in Florida. The maid informs the mistress that they are already there, and then asks why someone from the imperial palace suddenly came to her because she hopes that nothing serious has happened. The main character says that she has never been to the capital, let alone the palace, and assumes that this is probably a visit to her father. Suddenly, the girl saw a guy with blonde hair and a charming smile. The stranger says that she is just as she was described to him. The man says that His Majesty the Emperor has demanded a divorce from her. Hearing this, the young lady is surprised and says that she has never even met His Highness. The girl does not understand what kind of divorce we are talking about and asks about it because she does not understand anything. Viscount Isaac Majorino explains that the temple registered the marriage by mistake. The little girl, surprised, asks if she is now officially married to His Majesty. The gentleman claims that this is indeed the case, and according to the divorce procedure provided for by imperial law, after the divorce, the former empress must spend 10 years in seclusion. The man claims that this is in order to completely lose political power. Therefore, the current Viscount Majorino was ordered to come to the island of Likai. The stranger reports that this means that she will not be able to return to the mainland for 10 years. But in return, His Majesty has offered worthy compensation, promising vast lands, wealth, and an estate. Hearing this, the main character became very angry and screamed, asking if they were seriously making fun of her, because she understood that they had made a mistake. At this time, the father grabbed the girl and hugged her so that she would not beat this messenger. The guest says that he is leaving and quickly leaves. The assistant asks Sir Ryan if that is enough. He replies that they have done everything they had to. The father asks his daughter if she has finally calmed down, and she claims that this is too absurd even for the imperial family. The gentleman agrees with the girl, and she asks if he himself is not angry at this attitude towards them, because he knows that it shouldn't be like this. The Viscount claims that they cannot disobey the imperial decree, and for this he believes that it would be better to submit and not resist. The father of the main character was a knight commoner. 10 years ago, he took part in the war and became a hero, and for this he received the title of Viscount and the estate of Shukrim with its lands. The main character understands that he is not interested in noble feuds. After all, her father is a truly loyal subject of his people and is ready to give his life for the empire. Klitsia does not understand what the point is in obeying such an absurd order, because she believes that it is not much different from the participation of a traitor exiled for 10 years. The young lady reflects on the fact that she also has her own plans for life, because she must marry the Duke of the North and live happily. The little girl understands that being bound by human rules is simply terrible. The bird claims that she should not lose heart because she belongs to the great bonds that control the flow of the world. The main character asks how many years he has been talking this nonsense because he thinks that it is not important now. The bird explains that she is now talking about great universities, and the young lady says that this is not appropriate because she will not sacrifice herself like her father. Klitsia says that she will create a commotion in the temple and force them to correct the situation, and if nothing comes of it, she will also look into the imperial palace because she believes that she must personally see the face of the man called her husband. Having heard this, the bird evaporated, as it understood that these bonds had finally begun to work, and it somehow became easier for it, and therefore it could rest. The main character changed into a boy's clothes, and then quickly left the castle in the hope of getting to the stables and being unnoticed by anyone. Suddenly, the little girl saw her father and was surprised, and he asked if she was heading to the capital because he didn't understand why she was looking like that and at such a late hour. The Viscount claims that the emperor's order is the duty of a nobleman and the honor of a knight, and if she really wants to go, then she must first defeat his red lion, Shukrim. The father raised his sword, but suddenly fell, and then said that his daughter had already mastered the fire rune at an advanced level, and that this was enough to resist her old father. The servant informs the Viscount that Lady Klitsia has crossed the main gate and asks whether he should send a pursuit. The gentleman says no, as he believes they have done everything possible to prevent her escape. The Viscount claims that the time has come for her to be able to make decisions personally, because she understands that with her genes, she should not live under the eternal guardianship and orders of her elders, because she must try herself in real trials. The main character arrived at the gates of the city of Muta, which was a paradise for travelers, and the largest trading city of the empire. Since this is the only way from the south to the capital, not only all the merchants of the continent, but also countless travelers, mercenaries, ordinary workers, and bandits arrived there. So this place is always full of people and money, and of course there were different things going on there, and not always truly good ones. The little girl was very happy that she had finally arrived, but she understood that she had overdone it when she decided to cover a 2-week distance in 3 days, because she had been jumping with all her might without any breaks. But suddenly, the horse gets tired, and the little girl asks her to get ready, because she understands that people cannot find out that she is a hybrid horse, because they will take her for an ordinary traveler. At this time, the horse thought that the owner had completely lost her conscience, and then asked if she planned to continue feeding her pitiful pieces of dried beef. Klitsia asked the animal to be patient for at least a week, because when they get to the capital, he will eat whatever he wants. The horse thinks that this is cruelty to animals. The little girl understands that her poor horse, who always has a hard time with separation, is probably tired and very hungry. And then she leaves. The main character saw a hotel and asked if there was a room with food, because she was very hungry. The men who were sitting at the next table were surprised because they doubted whether it was really a man because he was kind of skinny. At this time, the little girl pounced on the food and thought that she was very hungry and remembered her father's words, that if she left home, she would have a hard time. The girl looked at the large piece of meat and thought about leaving a little bit for Shukrim, but realized that it was too risky because they could get caught. Shukrim is a hybrid horse, and its genus belongs to the most ancient creatures obtained from a mixture of a dragon and a horse. In other words, it can be attributed to the sacred animals. This incredibly intelligent carnivore is so hardy that it can cross the entire continent in a week, while eating little and working a lot. Of course, their value is indescribable, because such animals are difficult to find outside the imperial family, and the main character understands that she was lucky to pick it up on the road. The little girl remembers that when she was a child, she bumped into him on the street right in the middle of a battlefield and asked if he wanted to eat some of that dried meat. However, the horse refused and said that even if she was of the same blood, he would not fall for some piece because he had his own rules. Klitsia sat on her horse and was very happy. The war with the servant empire lasted 10 years, and she grew in the course of its advancement. The main character's father often took her with him to the recent battlefields, and when she turned 10 years old, it finally ended, and that was her childhood. The little girl thought that now that she had decided to enjoy her youth, She was being told to spend another 10 years in exile, and therefore she would very much like the emperor to be an accommodating person. Muta is the largest trading city of the Fursa Empire, and there are those who rule it, and in some aspects, they are even more powerful than the imperial family and influential in the temple itself. The joint stock company is Toma Holdings Corporation, and there is no place in Muta where Tom's hands have not reached, from children's candy to money from the black market. This huge company dominates the Fursa Empire, and it is surprising that it is in the hands of one young guy who is doing a good job and running the business. Founder of Toma Holdings, Toma Holdings. A handsome guy with black hair and a cold look. He is of noble origin and therefore very smart. When the man saw the horse, he wondered where it came from. The servant explains that it was left by a guest of the hotel, Toma, and does not understand what is wrong. Then, in surprise, he asks if the guest is from a noble family. The worker asks for forgiveness and explains that he is only a groom and does not know the details, but he understands that since he is staying at this hotel, he is most likely a commoner. Rukin orders to find out everything about this guest. The servant asks why the master suddenly wanted to know every little detail about this horse. Sir explains that if he wants to do business wisely, he needs to be more discerning, because he sees that this is not an ordinary horse, but a hybrid. Having heard this, the worker does not understand where some commoner got such a horse from and thinks that this is not a simple situation that he needs to resolve. The gentleman explains that most likely their guest has reasons to hide his identity and suggests that this could be an attempt by the emperor to send his man to them. The main character lay down on the bed and immediately fell asleep. And at that time, the men entered her room and were surprised when they saw her because she looked more like a runaway noblewoman. The guy says that nothing that can be stolen can be hidden from them, the legendary brothers of the night. However, in reality, they are petty thieves. The thief asks his brother if he remembers how much wild mushroom powder was in her dish, because he understands that it is enough to knock out a herd of elephants and she may not wake up quickly. The robber understands that they can easily take all her things, but suddenly he saw the jewel and realized that she was from a noble family. The brother thinks that they were lucky because he was afraid that he would run into a poor man again, but as it turned out, they had been very lucky with luck for a long time. The robber saw the sword and thought that it looked like some kind of antique that was very expensive. Suddenly, the man felt pain from the blow, and then screaming, he asks when this girl managed to wake up, because he understands that she should still be sleeping. The main character pushed the man to the floor and then pressed his neck with her hand and angrily asked how they dared to disturb Krita and her peaceful night. The little girl turns to the thieves and asks them to tell only the truth, and then asks if they were trying to steal her precious Krita. The robbers insist that this is not true at all, because they don't even know what kind of Krita it is, and they are just thieves who wanted to get some coins. Klitsia wonders if they want to say that they were a couple of thieves wandering around the area, and completely by chance chose her room. The men insist that this is true, and they only hoped to make a little profit from the young and inexperienced travelers for their own good. The thief says that they usually put sleeping pills in the visitors' food beforehand, and by the way, they are quite famous in these parts, because they are the legends of the Muta brothers of the night. The robber claims that they are capable of stealing anything and anywhere, and this is their working motto because they have a lot of experience and have never had any failed cases. The little girl asks if they use sleeping pills, because she understands that this substance is very expensive, and not everyone can buy or get it. The man explains that few people know this, but the powder of wild mushrooms works great as a sleeping pill, but they are puzzled as to why it didn't work on her. Klitsia reports that forest mushrooms do not affect her. Hearing this, the robbers were surprised, because this was the first time such a case had happened to them. The Red Lion of Shumarin, Knight Isaac Mezzarino, was in the nightly squad, along with the named uncles and aunts of Klitsia, and did well. Among them was a young warrior who had earned a reputation as a master of medicine and a wise woman. Klitsia called her Aunt Lance and respected her greatly. Lance made an invaluable contribution during the fighting when there were problems with the supply of medicines, and she managed to bravely participate in all the battles. The problem was that Lance had become overly attached to little Klitsia. Through a subtle approach to dosing dangerous substances, Lance was able to develop a strong immunity to poisons in Klitsia. The main character reports that practically no poisons affect her, because she was simply tired from the road and therefore quickly switched off. The robbers don't understand how this is possible, because not only did she beat two grown men like children, but poison doesn't work on her either, and they wondered if she was really human. The little girl says that she should hand them over to the city guard. Hearing this, the thieves beg her to have mercy on them this time. The men insist that they will no longer engage in theft or other activities, as hunger and despair drove them to commit this dirty act. The robber says that their mother is seriously ill and they have difficulty finding money for medicine, and then begs the girl not to do this. Suddenly, the main character heard a question from a man standing behind the door, asking if everything was okay with her, because a strange noise was coming from her room. Klitsia turns to the thieves and tells them to take the money and get lost, because they have 10 seconds to do all this, and therefore they must make it in time. Hearing this, the guys are surprised and ask if she is letting them go. And the little girl says that even though they are thieves, it doesn't look like they managed to hurt or kill anyone. The girl suggests that this is their chance to get off the slippery slope, and then tells them to definitely spend this money on medicine for their mother. The thief looked at the lady in surprise and said that she was a red witch. Hearing this, the girl thought that it seemed like she had been hasty in deciding to let them go. The robber falls to his knees and asks for forgiveness, because he misspoke, and then takes the bag of coins and thanks her for her mercy, and says that they are leaving right now. The men jumped out the window and screamed, saying that she was a moron who simply believed this nonsense, because they had never seen their parents in their lives, and therefore assumed that they would be better at deceiving people than robbing them. The thief thought that for a second, he thought he had met the Red Witch again, and then asked his brother if they should really quit. At this time, the main character opened the door and assures the hotel director that she is fine because she was just trying to swat a bug, and he asks if there were any robbers. The girl thought that she didn't remember her mother at all, and thought that maybe that was why she gave in to her emotions, and then asked the director if he was in cahoots with them. Klitsia looked out the window and saw a thief who managed to escape, and assumed that it seemed that lawlessness reigned in this area, and there were many such robbers. The girl does not understand how she can travel when there are thieves and murderers all around, because she was not at all prepared for this, because she understands that it will not be easy for her. At this time, the servant reports to the master that this man looks about 18 years old and used gold coins from the central bank for payment. The assistant reports that they say that upon arrival, he was covered in dust and dirt like a homeless person, but the guest boldly approached the worker as if nothing had happened. The servant explains that he ate as if he had been hungry for a long time, and at the same time observed basic etiquette, and this attracted the attention of other visitors. The gentleman assumes that it looks like a young offspring of southern nobles, and the hybrid horse in the stable looked exhausted, because he understands that in order to bring it to such a state, it is necessary to ride without stopping for at least 3 days. Rukin believes that it is logical to assume that her owner has traveled all this way from the depths of the southern lands of the empire, since this is probably his first time in the city. The gentleman says that since the young nobleman uses a hybrid for transportation and rushes to the capital in a hurry while hiding his identity, then most likely he has an extremely urgent matter. At this time, an assistant enters the room and reports that he managed to conduct surveillance as he ordered, and in addition to him, the so-called Brothers of the Night were in the indicated place. Hearing this, the sir was surprised, because he understood that these petty thieves had been operating in their city for several years and were carefully hiding. The assistant reports that he approached to help the young man in case of danger, but he easily defeated the brothers, and moreover, if he understood correctly, he has immunity to any poisons. The man reports that as soon as the guest suspected his presence, he immediately retreated. Hearing this, the gentleman thought that it was impossible to say exactly which rune he was using, but it seemed they were dealing with the owner of the runes. Rukin asks Luke how things are with the imperial family and whether he has heard anything from the elders. The assistant says that there is no news yet and that Xena only sent some financial reports. The gentleman says that he increasingly suspects that this man is a spy for His Majesty, and then offers to arrange a meeting for them, because everything should go as naturally as possible. 20 years ago, the continent of Ashi was consumed by the flames of imperial ambition. The imperial family, which possessed the power to destroy human consciousness, swept through many countries, leaving behind devastation and mountains of dead people. And when the entire continent was on the verge of collapse, the Furza Empire, led by the knight Isaac, successfully recaptured the vast southern lands. It was this event that earned him the title of the Red Lion. This title served as the beginning of an even more bitter war between the two empires, and after 9 painful years of war, the situation was turned upside down in an instant at the Battle of the Carrion Fields. Thanks to one man who beheaded all the members of the imperial family of Servan with his own hands, the military and strategic genius of this young man united the lands under his banner and ended the war. This was the 16-year-old crown prince of the Furza Empire, now the sole ruler of the 5 great dynasties of this continent, Jan Fursa. Thus, the youngest emperor in history managed to stabilize the entire foreign policy situation of Jan Fursa during his 10 years of rule. When the emperor found out that he was married, his subordinates tried to justify themselves by saying that the temple had made a mistake and the registration had been completed 3 years ago. The assistant explains that therefore, according to official documents, at the moment he has a wife from a good family who is very beautiful and smart. His Majesty asks in surprise how they are reporting this to him only 3 years later, and then he suggests that they simply quietly correct everything so that no traces of this ridiculous mistake remain. The servant asks for forgiveness and explains that this is impossible because the marriage process is under the jurisdiction of the temple and the imperial palace has no right to interfere in their affairs. The assistant explains that this situation has arisen for the first time, and therefore this error is very difficult to correct because it takes a lot of time. At this time, the great emperor Jan Fursa, the war hero, the savior of the entire continent, in the absence of the general public, reveals his true nature as a ruthless psychopath, a mad dog, a scoundrel. His Majesty says that he needs a meeting with the high priest and offers to organize it right now, and at that very moment, because he is furious. Imperial advisor Count Owen Miri, upon hearing this, prays to God that the temple immediately fix everything, as he understands that it will get even worse. The chief priest claims that this is impossible, because this is what the rules say, and the birth document of a member of the imperial family, his education, and everything else is always regulated by the temple. The priest claims that this unbreakable rule was introduced to prevent any possible machinations within the imperial palace, and for this reason, even the emperor is not able to change their contents. His Majesty believes that this is not a matter of simple editing of documents, because this is a mistake of the temple that should be corrected immediately. The chief priest claims that this is only his statement, and according to the temple records, the marriage registration was filed and signed 3 years ago, and the period during which this document can be adjusted is 1 year. The priest explains that, after this time, all records are blessed and sealed. After all, no matter what their reason is, from now on, even His Majesty has no right to have them. The priest reports that since the events are very important, the document was blessed 3 times, so it won't work the other way around. Jan wonders what would happen if they invited all the people involved to testify, and whether that could affect the legitimacy of the document. The high priest asks how they know that the legal wife is not under pressure from the emperor, who has changed his tastes. Hearing this, His Majesty asks if he realizes what he is accusing him of, and if he understands the bitchiness of these words, which are very important to him. When the count saw that the master was using the rune, he screamed and asked him to recall it, because it was a sacred temple. The priest approaches the emperor and tells him that he is the most influential and powerful man in their entire empire, and therefore the laws must be applied most strictly when it comes to him directly. The high priest of this temple firmly declares that the marriage of His Majesty will not be annulled, because it is impossible and not in his power. Hearing this, the emperor became very angry and thought that maybe he should just burn them, and thought that his people would get used to the new religion. After talking with the high priest, His Majesty believes that these Cretans have completely lost their minds, because they dared to seal the records of the emperor's marriage without even warning him. Several years ago, an assistant informed His Majesty that he had accumulated a lot of paperwork. The emperor suggested that his assistant handle this work because he believed that it was not for nothing that he had hired him for this position. Owen says in surprise that he has no right to sign them himself because he believes that such papers as, for example, budget allocation require his attention. The assistant believes that the emperor needs to see some documents personally, and only in this way, and not otherwise, because it is important. After the battle with the criminals, Ian says that these idiots think that they can finish him off, and then asks the assistant what he said about the documents. Owen explains that, for example, he has papers from the temple that he must look at himself, because this is enshrined in law. His Majesty suggested simply postponing them and not sending them. Hearing this, the assistant is surprised and says that this could be very important and that he should do it as a last resort. The emperor looked at the servant and reiterated not to send them. The man explains that most of them are financial donations and does not understand how many he should let through. Jan suggests deciding for himself, and the assistant explains that this could lead to problems since he understands the importance of these documents. At this time, Owen assumes that maybe this ridiculous mistake happened then, which became a problem after so many years, and now he is paying for it. Hearing this, His Majesty grabbed his assistant by the shirt and claimed that he should have prevented all potential problems then. The man explains that he tried his best to draw his attention to those documents, but at that time, the emperor did not want to hear him. At this time, the count enters the room and asks not to torment his brother, as he believes that it cannot be that they do not find a way out of this situation. The man believes that they are not actually a married couple and asks if this is true, and then says that divorce is the only solution now. Owen says that all the records will remain in the documents, but practically no one has the right to view them, and therefore this is a good option for the palace. His Majesty asks who this woman is, and the assistant explains that she is a noblewoman from the provincial lands who is the eldest daughter of the Viscount Megerino, Lady Klitsia. Hearing this, the emperor realized that she was the daughter of the Red Lion. The assistant reports that she is now 21 years old, and no problems have been noticed. His Majesty suggests forgetting about divorce, since the very young lady will be branded as a divorced woman, and asks if this is the case. And besides, a divorce from the emperor means living in de facto exile for 10 whole years. Hearing this, the assistant was surprised, because His Majesty the Emperor was worried about someone other than himself, and he was seeing this for the first time. The man turns to His Majesty and informs that this divorce will only bring benefits to Lady Klitsia, since she will receive all the benefits of the former empress. The assistant reports that the lady will receive a huge payment with the new possessions and believes that for the Viscount's daughter, this is a real gift of fate. However, Ian claims that the fact remains that they risk ruining the young lady's future, and then asks if there are other options. His Majesty asks how they feel about the national mourning option. His assistants were surprised to hear this and insist that now is not the time for such jokes. The emperor says that if none of the options are suitable, he asks why they don't just marry her, since he believes that perhaps this is the very fate. His Majesty turns to the brothers and suggests that they go out for a while with the help of his rune, since they irritate him, and he is tired and nervous because of this. In the Furza Empire, the first is the summoning of magic using minerals called mana stones. They work on the basis of complex rituals and calculations. The second rune magic is based on natural forces by accumulating them in the body of the magician, and in their areas, magic is widespread and used for routine needs. This magic is quite accessible due to the presence of mana stones. However, rune magic requires physiological characteristics and is not within everyone's power. In other words, a person must have a natural gift. In the Furza Empire, there are people with outstanding combat and magical skills. They are called rune knights. The assistant, watching his master, thinks that he is again smashing everything around him, and at the same time does not pay attention to what is happening around him. The wind rune is also known as the power of the flow. It is most effective for combat, which is why most rune knights, including Sir Ryan, chose the wind rune. In contrast, the ice rune is also known as the frost rune and is considered much less effective for battle, but it is also strong and powerful. The man turns to his brother and says that if he overdoes it with the wind rune, then they need to break the distance. The emperor has control over all 5 elemental runes, which is one of the reasons why he is the sole ruler of the 5 great dynasties of the continent. The man believes that it seems that he did not give his only younger brother enough discipline lessons, as he should have spent more time raising him, and therefore asks for forgiveness for this. The gentleman offers to thank him for being so kind to him, and then he offers to go to the Megerino estate and inform them of the divorce in person. Hearing this, the assistant was surprised, because he understood that it was a 2-week journey on horseback to Shamaran, and he was the captain of the palace guard, and was wondering if the master really wanted to send him there. Thus, 2 weeks later, the assistant found himself at the Megerino estate on an important visit, and in the hope of understanding and resolving this issue. Brother is very gentle when it comes to Isaac Megerino. After all, when this former commoner brazenly refused the emperor to accept the position of commander of the troops, instead of punishing him, Jan granted Isaac a noble title and personal estates. The assistant thought that he would have to put pressure on them using this fact, but he considered that there was no need for this and decided not to use this trump card. The man thought that this was an ordinary backwater estate with an old retired knight and his ill-bred daughter, and therefore thought that there was no need to worry. Sir Ryan Furza, the only brother of the current ruler, he renounced the life of a nobleman to become the emperor's swordsman and, through his own efforts, achieved the rank of captain of the elite imperial palace guard. However, the man did not yet know that a poorly educated girl from a backwater estate was capable of creating such a stir in the empire. The assistant reports on a young man named Sasha Lin because he understands that they need to resolve this issue urgently and asks what he will be ordered to do. This is Tom's secretary Luke, saying that the boss ordered everything to be as natural as possible, and also wondering what's up with this idea about a hybrid horse. The assistant explains that the owner said that he is leaving tomorrow and only asks to give the horse some water since hybrids only try to eat meat, and it will not be difficult for them to reveal this fact. Luke heard this and was happy because he understood that this was wonderful and they would take advantage of this chance and hoped that everything would go well. The main character looked and did not understand what was happening because her horse had caused a pogrom in the butcher shop and she had no idea about it. At this time, people do not understand how a horse can eat meat and think that it is some kind of monster, since they see something like this for the first time, and this even scares them. The city's residents were surprised because someone's mad horse had created chaos, and the merchants and guards could do nothing but just watch in fear. Klitsia quietly asks the horse to explain to her what is going on here and how she came up with the idea of causing such a disturbance in front of the whole city. Shukrim asks the hostess to wait because this is a misunderstanding, because he was suddenly seized by a terrible hunger and he could not control himself, and this is completely understandable. The little girl took a piece of meat from the horse's mouth and asks if he is tired of living, and the animal asks for another piece because he believes that it is wrong to throw food out of the mouth of the eater. However, the main character resolutely tells him to let go quickly before she chops him into horse meat and orders him to listen to his mistress, because things are bad. The gentleman turns to the girl and asks if she is the owner of this horse. And at that moment, she thought that now there will be no end to the problems. The little girl explains that she is really sorry because her horse usually doesn't cause any problems, and this is not like her at all. The main character claims that this incident was a real shock for her because they were planning to leave Muta that morning. Hearing this, the man thought that everything was working out and how the boss had assumed this was all an unusual traveler, because anyone else in his place would have begged for forgiveness in tears and on his knees. The gentleman understood that this stranger was suspiciously calm, and the food saturated with a substance to stimulate appetite was even more effective than he thought. The secretary knew that this monster had broken through 3 buildings to get to the food, but if that hadn't happened, they wouldn't have been able to organize everything in such a miraculous way. The main character asks what kind of compensation they want, because she assumes that he is the one who owns this counter. However, the man objects and explains that it is owned by their subordinate, and they are now at the headquarters of Tom's company, and the meat counter that was destroyed is run by their man. The gentleman says that they will therefore take on the legal process themselves, since he assumes that the young man will not be able to cope with it, since he does not have such an education. The young lady enthusiastically says that she heard about their company and thinks that everything will probably go easier than he thought, and for this reason she agrees. The little girl realizes that her horse has made a mess in the big shot store, and she has no choice but to agree because she knows it's her fault. Meanwhile, the man thinks about how the guy remains calm even after hearing Toma's name, and therefore thinks that he is becoming more and more suspicious. Luke explains that since the losses are quite significant, he has no right to deal with them personally, and therefore declines on this point, since he has a lot of things to do. Klitsia, alone in the room, thinks about how she can't even imagine how much he will ask for and what compensation he will want, and that this will not help her. The man greeted the dear guest, and then said that he was informed that his horse had made a little mess, and that he was surprised by this. When the main character saw this guy, she thought that his dark hair and red eyes and coal, black suit, meant that maybe he was the Duke of the North. The little girl doesn't understand how he knows, because he is a brilliant entrepreneur with a gilded hand, and at this time he solves such issues on his own. Despite his lowly origins, Tom now has more capital than many high-ranking nobles and is good at it. However, the girl understands that this is not his real identity and assumes that he is Eugene Weiner de Servan, the last scion of the imperial family. This guy is the leader of the rebel forces who want to revive their empire. After all, he once held the title of Duke and owned vast northern territories. The gentleman looks at this guy and thinks that he is more suitable for a girl and even hides his gender, and therefore he became interested because judging by the way she holds the cup, she is clearly the daughter of a noble family. Tom realizes that it is much more important that she knows about his origins, and then asks for forgiveness, and asks if she could clarify what the Duke of the North means and what she meant by that. The man thought that depending on her answer, he would decide whether to finish off this girl right here and now. The main character realized that she had completely forgotten herself for a second, because he so perfectly personified the Northern Duke that she accidentally blurted it out. The man asks if she just called him the Duke of the North, and the little girl tells him to forget it, because it was a slip of the tongue that she said out loud. The girl suggests not to talk about it, and then asks what will happen with the compensation, and what are his conditions for this time. The gentleman thought that she was trying to change the subject so awkwardly and wanted to fool him that he could hardly hold back his laughter. Klitsia wonders how much she owes him. Tom suggests they calculate it right there and then, instead of putting it off until another time. When the little girl saw the bill in his hand, she was surprised and asked where he got it from, because she couldn't even imagine that he was prepared to meet her. Tom says that it is necessary to calculate the costs of repairing 3 buildings, compensation for future losses, and for moral damages to the store owner. The gentleman says that the cost of all the destroyed goods is waste disposal fees, taxes, and also compensation for the tree belonging to 2 street vendors. The man reports that the final amount is 50,000 rubles. However, part of the blame also lies with the carelessly equipped stable, and therefore they are ready to cover 10% of all expenses. Hearing this, the main character was surprised and said that this was a tidy sum, and then asked what to do about it. And at that time, she thought that for this money, it would be possible to buy a dozen houses. The girl understands that the Muta Trade Center is located not far from the capital, and therefore the prices are high, and, in addition, business expenses have also inflated the price tag quite a bit. Klitsia thinks about the fact that a trust fund was opened in her name, which was founded by her father, and if she withdraws money from it, he will be informed. The girl understands that since her father is most likely looking for her now, he will probably personally come to Mutu, and therefore assumes that Daddy will somehow sort this out. At this time, the guy looked at the girl and thought that it was very strange, because she probably realized that this was a fabulous sum, and yet she so easily agreed to pay it off. The gentleman thinks that it would be logical to finally stop pretending to be a commoner, because he doesn't understand why she wastes time on this. However, he guesses that maybe she is just testing him. The guy thinks that he can't understand whether she's pretending to be stupid or is really that way, because it's hard for him to read what's on her mind. The main character says that she does not have that kind of money with her, and therefore she needs to withdraw the amount from the Imperial Bank. She asks if she can go there. Tom says that she won't find a suitable bank in Muta, and therefore she will have to go to the capital. And therefore, he thinks that it is very risky to give her several days for the trip. The gentleman says that she will have to leave a deposit. Hearing this, the little girl was surprised, because she had nothing on her, and she said so. The man tells her that her horse is a hybrid and asks if that is true, then claims that it will do just fine. Hearing this, the main character was surprised, because she did not understand how he knew this. But suddenly, she realized that Shukrim had broken several buildings and was eating meat in front of the crowd. Klitsia understands that now he will understand that she is not a commoner, and then quietly says that he could of course leave the horse to Muta, but does not know how she can get to another city. Tom says he has personal business in the capital and asks why they don't go together. The little girl says that would be great. When the secretary heard that his master was going to go to the capital with that young man, or rather girl, he asked in surprise if he was sure about it. Luke reports that there has been no noise from the emperor lately, and suggests that this could very well be a trap. Tom says that he knows the most effective way to look into a person's soul, and believes that all you need to do is continue talking to him, no matter how smart he is at negotiating and deceiving. The man understands that over time, even the most sophisticated tricksters can reveal all their secrets, and their plans become obvious regardless of what they are hiding. The gentleman says that the journey to the capital will take the whole day, and he believes that he will slowly find out all its secrets. The next day, the carriage was moving quickly towards the capital. The little girl, sitting in the carriage, thought that a very awkward situation had happened and thought that it would probably be strange to act friendly when the fault lies with her. The girl ponders that she should start with a light compliment, and then says that he really does look like the Northern Duke. Hearing this, the man was confused because he did not understand what it meant and assumed that she was testing him again. Tom claims that, alas, he is poorly informed about the northern lands and is just an ordinary businessman. And at that time, he thought that he should behave naturally because he needs to observe her reaction. The little girl asks if he knows about the Great Duke of the North, and he doesn't understand what's wrong with her, and then asks if she means the title that the ruler of the northern lands receives. The gentleman thought that she wanted to draw him into a brutal psychological battle, and therefore he would have to turn on his brains, which were planning to rest. The main character adjusted her cap and said that in just one day, she would tell him everything he needed to know. Later, Eugene will bitterly regret this. The girl asks the first question, and the meaning of the question is that his beloved slipped and fell in the corridor and is interested in what his actions will be. Option A is to kill the architect who designed the corridor. Option B is to kill the servant responsible for cleaning, and option C is to kill the shoe designer. The gentleman asks why innocent people are being pumped over, because he doesn't understand what this has to do with the title of Duke. The little girl claims that this is wrong, and then asks a second question. She says that his beloved has insomnia and asks what his actions will be. Answer options. A. Kill the furniture maker who installed the bed. B. Kill the maid who failed to keep an eye on her insomnia and lover. C. Kill the tailor who made her pajamas. Tom doesn't understand why someone has to kill someone and thinks that this is a personality disorder test and asks if that's true. Klitsia screams and says that this is wrong because she thinks that he is doing a terrible job so far, and then asks a third question. The little girl says that the emperor is sending his beloved to war where she will inevitably die and asks what his actions will be. The guy replies that if this is an order from the emperor, then he is obliged to obey, and then asks what we are talking about here, because it is obvious. The girl claims that this is wrong and then screams and claims that he does not look like the Duke of the North at all, because he could have given the correct answer. Hearing this, the gentleman thought that, in fact, he is the real Duke, but he understands that he cannot say this yet, but he would really like to. Klitsia reports that it has been known since ancient times that a duke must be strong, cold-blooded, handsome, mysterious, and she knows a lot more. The girl claims that it is more important that he must be wonderful in bed. Hearing this, the guy does not understand what is wrong with this woman, and then asks to change the subject. The gentleman suggests talking about, for example, the purpose of her visit, or about that horse. However, the little girl insists that it won't be possible to dodge, and says that he should consider himself very lucky. The girl claims that he will not be able to find a more knowledgeable expert in the field of studying northern novels. Eugene will remember these days spent on the road for the rest of his days. The time has come that the young lords came to the capital of the Empire of Sigrid. The main character was surprised because she saw many tall buildings. The girl asks the gentleman if he could drop her off here, and at that moment he thought that he was finally saved from this insidious malady. The little girl explains that she just needs to withdraw money and buy her horse in Muta with it, and then thanks him for giving her a ride because he really helped her out. The gentleman was the first to get out of the carriage. He stopped and then thought, and decided to do the right thing, and then offered his hand and asked if he would help her, my lady. The main character looked at this guy and thought that his image was too good, and then said that even considering his appearance, she cannot count him passing the exam. The girl says that she can only give him 60 points, and that is the maximum, because she believes that he can surrender as the Northern Duke only when he gets 90 points. The little girl says that then she will gladly allow herself to be kidnapped, and the guy asks why he would kidnap Milady. She thanks the Grand Duke. Let's hear this secretary was surprised that this girl said the word Duke and thought that the gentleman revealed his true identity, and now he was just letting her go. Luke asks whether to send a spy after her or to set up surveillance, but the gentleman objects and suggests leaving everything as is, since there is nothing to worry about for now. After the destruction of his homeland, Mr. Eugene was obsessed with only the idea of taking revenge on the Furt's empire and was not particularly interested in anything else, because everything else was a trifle. And Tom didn't care about anything except this goal, because now he is the last member of the imperial family who fell in love. The man suggests heading straight to the office. However, the secretary thought that the gentleman should not let that woman go like that. Tom thinks that he was afraid all the way that he was about to go crazy. The gentleman had the feeling that her knowledge of the Northern Duke was homeless because she did not stop telling her story even at night. He does not understand where such a fragile body has so much energy. Eugene doesn't understand why she cares so much about the Duke's image. However, he knows that he should stop thinking about nonsense because it can drive him crazy. He thinks that this girl is a witch who wanted to drug him. At this time, the main character thought that she did not even notice the moment when this guy began to address her as a lady, and thinks that it seems that she got too carried away by the conversation and accidentally revealed that she is a girl. Klitsia saw the building and thought that, in any case, she needed to go to this temple, because the one who could say that the marriage registration was a banal mistake. The girl understands that she just needs to calmly explain the situation to them and solve this problem. She says that the Klitsia of Shumaran demands an audience with the high priest. However, no one opens the door, and the little girl does not understand what is going on, because she knows that the church must receive parishioners around the clock, and then she begins to knock on the door and scream loudly. The young lady asks if they fell asleep there or if they went on vacation, and then, screaming, orders that the door be opened for her, because she had come a long way for this. Suddenly, the boy opens the door and asks for forgiveness, and then says that the free food distribution is taking place in the building in front of the square, and not here. The little girl explains to the respected priest that she is not actually a vagabond, and her name is Klitsia Mejerino, and she is the daughter of Viscount Isaac, and therefore asks to be allowed to meet with the high priest. However, the boy chased her away and the girl left. At this time, the chief priest, observing this, tells his subordinate that in the future, if she comes again, he should try to send her away. The priest asks why the high priest won't let her into the temple. He explains that it's because she has to meet someone else first. The boy thought that now he felt somehow awkward in front of her, and that made him sad because he was not used to lying to someone, and that day he made a mistake. At this time, the main character thought that she was dying of hunger, because she had chatted so much with the Northern Duke that she had completely forgotten to eat on the road. The little girl thinks that first she should get money from the bank, and tomorrow again demand a meeting with the high priest, and if they don't let her in, she will simply break down the door. The girl thinks that since her identity has already been revealed, she can calmly withdraw money and buy an expensive room for the night. When the main character saw the door of the bank, she realized that it was closed on weekends and holidays. She was a little upset because she did not expect such a surprise. Suddenly, the young lady remembered the priest's words that the distribution of free food was being held in the building in front of the square, because she decided to go there and get free food. Klitsia thinks that she is a little ashamed to take something that is intended for tramps, but right now she looks like it. The girl saw that it was written on the door that today the food distribution was finished and suggested to come between 16 and 18 o'clock. She realized that she was 15 minutes late. The main character sat down on the floor and thought about what she had gotten herself into, because she understood that she shouldn't have given all the money to those thieves, because now she was alone in the capital without a single penny in her pocket and without even Shukrim. The little girl knows that now she will have to survive there for 2 whole days, but the only thing that makes her happy is that her darling and Kreta are still with her. And suddenly she realized that she had disappeared somewhere. At this time, the Duke looked at the sword and assumed that this weapon was very valuable to that girl, and she forgot it in a hurry. The main character believes that he is a false Duke of the North who dared to do this because she assumes that he initially wanted to stupefy her with his charming face and physique. At this time, the assistant objects to His Majesty. Yang claims that as an emperor, he simply wants to look at his people and asks what is wrong with that. Miri says that if he is recognized on the street, it causes a real stir. The gentleman says that therefore he will dress in something unremarkable. The assistant claims that nothing will come of it anyway, because his appearance is too recognizable, and then asks who else in the entire empire could have such bright hair. Miri asks his lordship if he has any idea how much trouble the guards will have with each of his walks. The assistant screams and asks to refrain from his secret inspections, and offers to organize an official tour of the capital with all the appropriate measures. The emperor objects, as he does not want it because it is too much fuss. A member of the palace guard, Clarence, addresses His Majesty and says that Count Miri's fears are well-founded. The lady shows the bottle and asks, how about this? Because these pills can change the color of his hair for about a day without any side effects. His Majesty ate the pills. Clarence explains that if he uses the rune, the effect will immediately disappear, so she suggests remembering this. When the emperor looked in the mirror, he saw brown hair and thought it was very convenient, and the assistant said that with such an appearance, problems could be avoided. Jan quickly goes out the window and tells the guards not to know anything about this. Miri wonders when His Majesty will start following official procedures. Clarence thinks that it is high time he got used to his character. The Count says that he has never heard of such drugs before. The lady asks if he has forgotten what people call her, and then says that she is a genius of modern medicine. The woman explains that the original purpose of these pills was to prevent hair loss, but they ended up with a drug with an unusual side effect. 10 years have passed since the end of the war. Furza is flourishing and developing as if it had never existed, but now problems of a different nature have arisen. The emperor, walking around the city, saw a door with signs saying that it was a free food distribution center. He wondered if there were really so many hungry people in his city that they had to open such a place. Jan recalls that a lot of time has passed since the decree on state aid was issued, and he doesn't know what these damn officials are doing. The emperor wondered if he was being too soft with them, and therefore believed that as soon as he returned, he would immediately order Miri to call them together. At this time, the main character touched the emperor and does not even imagine who he is. She says that unfortunately, the building is already closed for today. The little girl says that they work even on weekends, and therefore it is necessary to wait until tomorrow. After all, she wanted to calm this gentleman down. Hearing this, Jan thought that she was a woman in men's clothing, but what was more important was her energy, and he knew that without a doubt this girl was the owner of an advanced-level fire rune. His Majesty understands that in the entire empire there are not even 10 strong owners of the fire rune, and one stands before her in the form of a vagabond, and he became interested in who she is. The emperor realizes that he has to figure it out on his own, and then says that he is glad to meet her and asks if she would like to work for him. Hearing this, the little girl thought that he was not a tramp, because he was very attractive in appearance, and for some reason, she had the feeling that she had already seen this man before. The girl looked closely at the man and remembered that her type is black-haired dukes with red eyes, and bright hair, and green eyes are the features of secondary characters. The stranger says that he could provide her with food. Hearing this, the little girl bows her head and says that she will gladly take on the job. Klitsia claims that she will work as long as there is meat on the menu. The man thought about how happy this girl was to hear about food and was surprised. The emperor says that he is Private Detective Ray Vogue. Having heard this, the girl realized that he was lying and then extends her hand to him and says that she is Sasha. Lynn. The little girl asks what she should do now. The man asks if she sees the man and points at him, and then says that he is suspected of cheating on his official wife. The emperor tells her to follow him and find evidence. The young lady states that she is ready and then quickly follows the man. At this time, His Majesty looked at the girl's trail and thought that the red-haired owner of the fire rune strongly reminded him of himself. Watching the man, His Majesty screams and says that it looks like he noticed them, and the girl smiles and says that the target is at a dead end. Jan doesn't understand why he suddenly started running away, and at that time, the girl really wanted to catch up with him and therefore used the wind rune. Klitsia took the gentleman in her arms and offered him to hold her tightly. After a few minutes, they moved. The emperor says that she is an excellent employee, and at that time, he thought that since this person owns the rune, it means that he is not a small fish and therefore now has no right to let it go. The little girl reports that the man ran into the building and assumes that he is meeting his lover there, but she does not understand why he chose such a place. His Majesty saw 4 bronze 7s and realized that this was the lucky box, which is an underground auction house. The gentleman understands that no matter how complex the client's order is, they are capable of obtaining almost anything. However, since absolutely all goods are put up for auction, customers are forced to wait until their desired item is raffled off. Even so, with a 99% success rate, they became the most successful underground guild in the entire empire. The Duke asks the man what happened, and he explains that he had to shed his tail on the way here. The director asks what tail he is talking about, and also asks if he is speaking for one of their best employees. The man assures that he shouldn't worry because he successfully broke away from them. And what's more important is that he was able to get it and put the bag on the table and then says that they hit the jackpot. The stranger reports that he has something that can finish off His Majesty the Emperor. At this time, the main character asks if he asks her not to interfere. Jan looked at the baby and realized that she was an advanced owner of the fire rune and also physically strong. His Majesty understands that her help could be useful, but he believes that the best solution would be not to involve outsiders in these matters. The gentleman says that it is dangerous, and therefore suggests that she go back and forget what she saw today, because she has had enough of these big risks. Klitsia says that since it is dangerous there, she believes that he should not go alone, and then says that he would like to go there himself, since he, a sophisticated detective, should not be exposed to such danger. Jan touches the girl and says that next time they meet, he will definitely treat her, and then strokes her hair and asks her to leave him. The host turns to the ladies and gentlemen and announces that they are pleased to welcome them to today's auction. The emperor, sitting in the hall, thought that for such a famous gang, they had terrible security because he got here too easily, and he also took the mask and place from the poor fellow. The presenter offers to present them with a list of goods, and then announces that he has a breakthrough wind, incredibly rare creature, straight from a noble family, and it is an adult hybrid horse. The man reports that he has a sand tear slave from the mystical desert lands, and he is a beautiful young man who has a very unique appearance. The host asks if he is directly connected to His Majesty, and then says that the last lot is the death of the empire, and wonders if the very name of this lot does not excite the mind. At this time, the main character, being on the street, thought that today she would be able to eat a hearty meal, and suddenly remembered that the man was very light. The little girl understands that he can't even use the rune, and the emperor hides his energy perfectly, and doesn't understand what will happen if he falls into the hands of scoundrels who want to harm him. The presenter announces that they have a winner, and the gusts of wind leave for big money, because the price is even higher than he expected, and assumes that the biggest fish of the criminal world have gathered there. At this time, the emperor thought that in this situation, it would be better to contact the palace guard, rather than try to solve everything alone. The little girl asks in surprise if this is an auction. Jan looks at her in surprise and asks what Sasha's doing here. The young lady explains that he was worried about him, and so decided to slip in. The emperor, surprised, asks how she was let in, looking so suspicious. The girl explains that the guards are surprisingly useless, and then says in surprise that he did not expect to see something like that in such an inconspicuous building. The little girl understands that from the outside it resembled some kind of barn, and the gentleman heard this and thought that she was completely stupid. The host announces that they are moving on to the next lot, and this is a beautiful young man, San Tyr, born in the harsh lands on the edge of their continent, with eyes more reminiscent of rubies. The man explains that his skin is smooth and dark, and his hair is the color of the blue sky, and then asks if this is not a beautiful sight, and says that the starting price is 100,000 rubles. The main character heard this and didn't understand what they had been fighting for all these damn years. And then she turned to the detective and screamed, telling him to forgive her because there was something more important to do now, and ran away. Klitsia used magic to get onto the wall, and then screamed and said that slave trading was prohibited in their empire. The host turns to the guests and offers his deepest apologies for this misunderstanding, and then turns to the security and orders them to get him out of here quickly. The main character turns to the boy and then unties his hands and says that she will save him and suggests that he just stay close. The boy asks what she is doing and then screams and tells her not to interfere and to get out of here. The young lady looked at him and said that he was so small and had already learned to be rude, and then suggested that they get out of there and picked him up in her arms. At this time, the emperor watches her and thinks that it would be better to listen to this boy first, but he understands that it hardly matters. The gentleman understands that these scumbags have several owners of runes with them and are very proud of this, but at the same time, they forget that each magician also has his own limits. When it comes to the owners of the fire rune, it is difficult to imagine anything more destructive, because everything around is changing and not for the better. The main character, sitting in a safe place, says that it looks like he overdid it, because the lack of practice clearly shows, but at the same time, she took the boy. The guy screams and asks to let him go right now, and the lady asks in surprise if he is awake yet. The kid wonders how they both dare to interfere in his affairs, because he will never forgive it. The boy turns to the red-haired man and claims that he is especially to blame. The main character touches his head and suggests that he at least thank him first. Klitsia says that pointing at people is very impolite, and then pats the boy on the head again. Suddenly strangers appeared, and His Majesty says that he understood the situation, since they have been watching them for quite a long time, and therefore suggests that they not hide. The main character asks in surprise who these people are, and Jan turns to them and tells them to leave. The strangers take the boy and leave. The little girl wonders what kind of people they were and who that boy is. He explains that mirror is another kind of magic, and it is similar to runes, but slightly different. The girl says with delight that the detective is well read. Jan thought that he first needs to solve this problem. His Majesty advises that she lie low for a while, as he believes that the auction house's men will be trying to track her down. However, the main character did not take his words seriously, and she noticed that he left so quickly and did not even say goodbye, but she assumes that he can take care of himself, because he looks so frail. Suddenly, the little girl felt hungry and remembered that he had promised to treat her, and then, screaming, she said that the detective should buy her food. At this time, the servants tell Mr. Seth and claim that it was dangerous because he believes that his operation was too risky, and if the Sultan finds out about it, he will be furious. The boy says that if those two idiots hadn't appeared, everything would have gone according to plan, because he believes that the easiest way to find his brother is to join a nobleman's family under the guise of a slave. Seda asks his servants if they have found out who these people are. The man explains that the man with the bright brown hair is the emperor of the Furza Empire. Hearing this, the young gentleman asks in surprise if they are sure of this, since he understands that he is not at all like him. The servant explains that they have not yet figured out how and why the emperor hid under someone else's appearance, but the energy gave him away. Seda immediately understood why the aura seemed familiar to him, and then says that now that even the emperor is aware of the events, they should return immediately. Suddenly, the boy remembered that he was distracted and did not even notice how his pain suddenly subsided. And then he asks who the second person accompanying him was. The servant asks for forgiveness because they were unable to establish the identity, and they only found out that it was a woman who was hiding under the guise of a man. The young gentleman looked at the mayor and realized that she seemed to have stabilized, and the servant reminds him that they need to hurry because they don't have much time. The young man remembered that this girl called herself Sasha, and he became interested in how soon they would meet again because he would like to see her again. At this time, the emperor turns to his servants and asks what a bunch of idiots are doing around the clock and how they allowed a slave auction to take place right in his capital. The emperor summoned his officials in the middle of the night, and he did not even wait for dawn. He claims that he does not need excuses because he instructed them to take care of the well-being of the city. Ian wonders if they are planning to kill him. The assistant objects and claims that this is not the case at all, since Sir Ryan told them that fish will not swim in excessively clean water. His Majesty wonders if they followed Ryan's orders, and also wonders where he is now. The servant explains that as captain of the guard, he is most likely at the scene of the incident. At this time, the soldier turns to the captain and says that they have almost cleared all the rubble, and fortunately, not a single civilian was hurt. The gentleman thinks that they were very lucky. The knight informs the captain that they have already arrested all the suspects, and regarding the item that destroyed the empire, those questioned say that it was not sold. The captain carefully reads the report and says that everything is fine, and suggests that they forget about it, because there is nothing to find fault with. Tom at this time thought that he had spread rumors in various places, and everyone who has a nose for money probably heard them. Gentlemen, and therefore believed that everything should go according to plan because he had thought everything through well and there should be no obstacles. And now, all he had to do was wait. Servan Empire was destroyed long ago, but their descendants were not completely exterminated and now roam the lands of Fursa. After some time, they were preparing to implement their plan of revenge and approached it very quietly and at the same time insidiously. The captain, walking down the street, thought about what expression his brother would have when he found out about all this, and whether his thoughts would change. At this time, in a secret office in the capital of the empire, Tom met with his assistant, who said that the people of Xena had begun to act decisively, and they intended to strike at the emperor himself. Hearing this, the gentleman was surprised and screaming. He asked what the hell and why they didn't consult with him, their leader, first. The man explained that according to the elders, they were not satisfied with his plan. The assistant explains that this is all because the preparations have been too long, and it seems that they have some kind of trump card, and now they can't wait to use it to finish off the emperor. The elders said that tomorrow night their leader would be pleasantly surprised. Hearing this, the gentleman thought that they were a bunch of impatient old men. Tom announces that he has no intention of keeping idiots as assistants who only get in the way, and then claims that his plan is flawless. The nobles and subjects of the Servan Empire, who survived the war with Fursa, formed a secret organization called Xena and spread its roots throughout the continent, everywhere, sinking their fangs and claws in order to one day revive the former greatness of their empire. The Duke thought that he could understand their lack of restraint, because with the time of war, many years had come. However, the gentleman understands that these people do not realize that they survived it, and only because they met Jan Furtz personally. After all, they cannot even imagine what he is capable of. The Duke says that he will take a look at their so-called trump card. Hearing this, the assistant asks in surprise if he wants to advance personally. The secretary thinks that it is too dangerous, and it is better to send their group there. He is sincerely worried about his master. The gentleman claims that he is not going to help them in any way, but even if they are idiots, they will certainly carefully prepare the scene. The Duke thinks that since they are in the capital, he doesn't understand why they shouldn't watch everything from the front rows. After all, it will be interesting to know what they are capable of. Tom is wondering if they will start tomorrow night, because he needs to know because he doesn't want to miss this event that has interested him. At this time, the main character thought that the supplies that she managed to get disappeared in a second, and it was worth it for her to just turn away. The girl remembers that, as she was told, even the homeless people have all the places assigned, and she cannot sleep wherever she wants, because she might get hurt. The little girl didn't even expect that the capital would be such a cruel city, and therefore believes that all this happened to her because of these two bastards. Klitsia is sure that all this happened because of the emperor and his marriage, as well as the vile detective, and therefore she will never forgive them. Suddenly, the boy who was holding the bread touched the girl and asked if the brother was new. She said something like that and then apologized and asked if she had taken his place. The young man gave the girl bread and said that it was for her. She looked at him in surprise and asked how, because he was probably hungry too. The kid explains that he was given food in the canteen, and later he will be able to get more, and he would like to share it with those in need. The guy explains that this is free bread intended for the starving, and he thinks that this young man looked very exhausted, and therefore decided that he needs it more. The main character thought that this capital is beautiful because it has food that a boy completely unfamiliar gave her, because it was then that she was very hungry. Klitsia doesn't understand why there are so many homeless people on the streets and asks about it. After all, she thought it was the richest city. The kid asks in surprise if he knew about it. The boy explains that the homeless and the poor deliberately flock here from different regions. Since the emperor is personally responsible for the well-being of the capital, it is much easier to get help and support there. The guy says that some vagabonds are even hired, and he is originally from Shukrim and lived in a small nearby village. But his parents abandoned him, and he miraculously managed to get to this city. The kid thinks that no one cares about the people as much as His Majesty the Emperor does, and talks about it with delight. The lady says that there are also many poor people in Shukrim. The girl asks if there are places without them, and thinks that he speaks like a noble brother. After all, there is a deep meaning in his words. The boy says that soon His Majesty will put an end to all poverty in the empire, and he believes in it because the emperor is just. The guy says that he respects His Majesty very much, but suddenly, someone throws bread in his face, and the gentleman asks his friend why he is throwing food around. The count asks if he sees that he decided to feed the homeless man, because his appetite has disappeared from the nauseating stench, because he doesn't understand where all these rats are coming from. The gentleman says that he does not understand what the emperor is thinking at all, since he believes that he could have cleansed their city long ago, and then smiled. The man looked at the boy and asked if he was angry, and also asked if he understood who he was baring his teeth at. And then he called the little one his offspring. In a few minutes, the gentleman with one tooth missing and his head bandaged, screaming, asks how he dared, and then asks the main character if he knows who his father is. At this time, the girl thought that the rules here are strict, because the guards came running as soon as he hit someone once. The guards are talking among themselves about how this young man is a criminal and a scoundrel, and the young lady thought that at her home, everything could be resolved with a simple handshake. Klitsia thinks that it would not be difficult for her to get out of that situation by using the rune. But suddenly, the guards turn to her, screaming and telling him to stay where he is and not even try to escape. In a few minutes, the guards surrounded the girl and then threw her to the floor. They do not understand how this happened because this young man simply fell. At this time, the main character thought that she could not stand it any longer because she just wanted to eat normal food and really hoped for it. The guard officer screams and says that the man he beat up is the youngest son of a high-ranking official, not to mention that street fights are strictly prohibited. The young lady sits quietly and listens to all this, but thinks that he is yelling very loudly and it irritates her. The man insists that she should not dare to ignore him. The officer asks her to say her name, age, and where she is from, and also asks for what purpose she came to the capital. The girl thought that she needed to calm down and she would just tell the truth. Klitsia reports that she is the daughter of a viscount from Shukrim who has come to the capital to meet with the high priest and His Majesty. The officer was surprised to hear this and then asked if she had an ID. The little girl said that she had lost it. The gentleman reports that the defendant was convicted of armed robbery since his name, age, and occupation are unknown, and he believes that he probably entered the capital illegally. The main character was locked behind bars with other robbers. The guards believed that she had signs of psychological deviations and delirium, and therefore could be dangerous to society. The officer believes that there is no need for further investigation, and therefore pronounced the verdict of 3 months imprisonment, because he believes that this will be an appropriate reprimand. The man who was behind bars asks the young lady if this is her first time in prison. She screams and explains that she was unjustly imprisoned, but rather that she is partly to blame. The girl claims that the blame lies not only with her, because even though she hit one idiot once, she believes that he asked for it himself. She says that in fact it was self-defense, because this is real arbitrariness. The stranger calmed the girl down and said that everyone says that, and therefore suggests that she calm down, because he believes that everything was supposed to be that way. Late at night, the man who was sitting behind bars with the help of runes came out of the cage. The assistants gave him a cloak and said that everything was ready because the operation to eliminate the emperor was starting right now. The silver rogues of Xena who have gathered, and their leader says that at the right dosage, the powder of forest mushrooms works great, and thinks that it is good that they have collected them in the right quantity. The assistant reports that the antidote is also working, and the moon is much brighter than usual today, and therefore hopes that this will not worsen the camouflage. The man claims that it is a perfect night to kill the emperor, and that there will not be a more suitable day for the foreseeable future. The main character doesn't understand what the fashion for sleeping pills is, because she's tired of waiting for them to leave, and decided that, in the presence of all these suspicious people, it would be better to pretend to be asleep. Klitsia reflects on the fact that after hearing their conversations, she thinks it is too serious to simply ignore. After all, they were talking about an operation to eliminate. The little girl thought that she needed to find the officer on duty and report everything to him. She went out through the open door and realized that she was on the inside of the palace. The girl doesn't understand why there isn't a single guard there and thinks it's irresponsible. Then she tied her hair and realized that she'd have to clean up someone else's problems again. At this time, Ryan turns to his brother. The gentleman, when he saw him, screams and says that he is a little bastard, and then asks what kind of mess he made in the city. His Majesty claims that if even one slave was sold at the auction, he will kill him. Ryan asks him not to get so excited, because now there is a much more important matter. The fair-haired man tells the emperor that he needs to go out into the garden immediately because there is a present waiting for him there, and he has tried very hard. Jan asks if he is up to something stupid again, and the assistant smiles and says that he has at least a little bit of trust, and therefore promises that he will not be disappointed. The man in the black cloak asks his comrade if he finds it suspicious, because this place should be full of guards, but they somehow got in too easily and still haven't met a single guard. The leader suggests that he think for himself, since they work for Xena, and therefore assumes that the elders probably made sure that nothing would interfere with their operations. The robbers saw His Majesty and hid in the bushes, and at this time, the Emperor does not understand what he should see here. Suddenly, His Majesty was surrounded by bandits, and at that time, Ian thought that Ryan was a bastard who dared to use him as bait. The group began to attack the Emperor, and he defended himself against them with his rune. Jan asks if this technology of containing magic and similar ones is very expensive. The robber says that everything is correct, because a lot of money was spent on it, and the magic of the Knights of Furza is truly impressive. But because he relies entirely on his runes, he can be easily suppressed by such devices, and it's just a matter of power. In the end, the Emperor himself became a victim of such a simple trick. Jan claims that it seems they don't know a damn thing, because rune knights don't resort to third-party sources of mana. His Majesty reports that this is because they are extremely ineffective and easily destroyed, since it is enough to just apply a lot of force. The robbers claim that this is nonsense because his own pride destroyed him and then attack him. Jan wonders if they really thought that was enough. At this time, the Duke tells his assistant that they have already arrived at the palace, but he is very surprised because he did not see any guards, and there should be many of them. When Furza finally defeated Servan and became the absolute power of the entire continent of Ashi, the secret organization Xena inherited the target of the defeated empire. There was practically no industry where their hand did not reach. Bribes, black market, gambling. They did not disdain anything to collect money. This group secretly trained professional mercenaries who were supposed to work for them and carry out all their orders, and also give their lives in their name at any time. Suddenly, the Duke heard the cry of the elder, who was wondering how much longer they were going to drag it out, since he believed that the Emperor should have done so long ago. But the man interrupts him and suggests that they be patient, because he believes that rushing things is too risky for them. The Duke reflects that after 10 years of fruitless waiting, their leaders have begun to turn into impatient old men with clouded minds. However, Xena remains the main driving force behind the revenge. Tom quickly left because he thought that they were old idiots and his own brother betrayed the Emperor. Ryan Bartier is a stupid slacker who was lucky to be born into a good family, and Tom thinks that they are stupid idiots because it is difficult to find a person more devoted to Ian than Ryan. At this time, the Emperor used his mana, and in a few minutes killed all the bandits who tried to harm him. Ryan, when he saw this, screams and turns to His Majesty and asks if he is okay. Ian asks if this is all they were able to prepare and calls them worthless. Clarence asks in surprise what is going on here, and then reports that all the guards were suddenly gathered and ordered to wait inside, and then an intruder alarm sounded. The Emperor explains that it's nothing special, his brother just decided to give him a gift. The lady wonders why no one warned them. His Majesty reports that he did not finish off anyone, and therefore asks to take away those people who were lying unconscious on the floor. Clarence says she will do anything to get the information out of them. Ryan says he is surprised the garden is still intact. His Majesty explains that his mother loved this garden very much, and therefore, if it were any other place, there would be devastation all around, and therefore he was attentive. Well, since the Emperor's mother valued this garden, he deliberately used only the water rune so as not to break anything, because this garden was dear to him. The Emperor understands that even the most experienced masters find it difficult to control their energy so precisely, because only a few can do it. Jan believes that this was a real surgical operation that only one person in the entire empire is capable of, and that is him. Ian turns to the lady and asks her to transfer Ryan here too, and let her do it immediately. The assistant asks the woman in surprise where she thinks he can be found now. Clarence says that she doesn't know, but she assumes that he is probably hiding from the Emperor again because he doesn't want to catch his eye. At this time, His Majesty reflects on the fact that the more he thinks, the more he admires his own genius, since he managed to force Xena's rats out of their basements with such ease. Suddenly, Jan saw a girl with red hair, and he became interested in how she got here, and then he used his rune to approach her, and at that time, he thought that he should not panic. The man asks what her number is, and then says that if she wants to run away, then she should go in the other direction, because the palace is on the other side, and that is where she will definitely be caught. His Majesty asks if she wants to be accused of a serious crime, and the little girl wonders in surprise what is happening in the palace. When the gentleman heard this question, he was surprised, and then apologized because he would hardly be able to tell her about it, and then smiled silently. The little girl claims that it is enough for her to know that the Emperor is okay. Jan asks why she is interested in this, and she says that caring for His Majesty is everyone's duty. The young lady claims that after all, they all live in the same empire. The gentleman agrees with her and says that she is right. The man then says that she doesn't have to worry because the Emperor is completely fine, and he knows it for sure, and therefore there's no need to worry about it. Hearing this, the little girl thanked him and quickly left. Jan looked after her and remembered that he had said that the palace was on the other side, and therefore, to think that this girl was just a runaway and there was no point in worrying. The Emperor thinks that this little girl is a very unusual girl because she understands that it is rare to meet the owner of the fire rune. He knows that she did not even worry when she met him. His Majesty understands that the girl's manner of speech was like that of a soldier, but what is more important is that he cannot shake the feeling that they have met somewhere. Suddenly, the man remembered the girl and realized that it was Lady Klitsia, and he became interested in what the hell she was doing here and how she got to this place. At this time, the main character thought that this was a good opportunity to meet the Emperor in person because she had to ask him all the accumulated questions and at the same time ask him to drop the charges against her. The girl thought that finally she would at least look at the face of her husband, who used her without her consent. The Duke orders the guards to make sure that not a single mouse escapes from the castle today, and not a single person leaves this palace. At this time, the young lady thought that during all this time she had not seen anyone, but suddenly in the distance she saw the silhouette of men and thought that her husband was there. His Majesty sensed something dangerous and used magic. And after a few minutes, he says that it looks like a rat just ran by, and that's why he reacted that way. The assistant says in surprise that he can't throw magic so carelessly because the floor is destroyed, and he will have to do repairs now. And therefore, he begs the master to restrain himself from magic, at least sometimes. At this time, a man in a black cloak with a mask on his mouth grabbed the main character and covered her mouth with his hand. She realized that this man was Tom Rukin. The Duke took off his mask and asked Milady what she was doing here. He also wondered why she was wearing this uniform, since it suggested that perhaps she had escaped from prison. Klitsia claims that she should actually be the one asking what he is doing here, looking so suspicious, and calls him Director Tom. Hearing this, the man thought that at first this girl seemed just strange to him, but now it is clear that this is an extremely unusual girl. The man reflects on the fact that he could have guessed from the start that she was an excellent fighter, and besides, hybrid horses are not just for everyone, but he does not understand why he just saved her. Tom asks the girl how many points he got today, and then reminds her that she said that you can only get a pass by getting 90 points. The man reminds her that she said that the Duke of the North must be strong, cold-blooded, mysterious, and beautiful, and then asks if that is true. The little girl thought that first she needed to get out of here, and then she said that he was the owner of 95 points. Luke turns to his master, and then apologizes for blocking and explains that he was trying to catch up with them. When the Duke looked at him, who realized that the baby was gone. At this time, His Majesty is thinking that the girl with red hair is Lady Klitsia, who recognized the man in the mask, but it does not seem like they are well acquainted. The Emperor recalls that 10 years ago, immediately after the end of the war, Eugene, who had black hair and red eyes, was a descendant of Servan and was his peer. Ryan then asks Ian if he thinks they'll ever see him again. The Emperor says he swore he'd find him himself, and it's only a matter of time. His Majesty says that this man has matured quite well, and the assistant asks in surprise who he is talking about. Ian asks his brother if he will explain to him what the hell he did in his palace. Ryan explains that they have been trying for a long time to track down Xena's people, walking around the Empire, but they always slip away. The assistant explains that for them, it was a thorn in one place, but he was able to convince them that he had betrayed the Empire and met in person. Ryan explains that he set it up so that they would fall into their trap by giving them false weak points and vulnerabilities. And while all their elite fighters were sent on an operation, he broke into the headquarters and smashed everything there. The man explains that in this way, he managed to exterminate these rats. Ian asks if this means that everything happened because of him, since all the hired killers came to the garden. Ryan is a little embarrassed and says that he thinks he deserves praise. At this time, the main character wonders if they can be tracked outside the castle, and then turns to the director and says that he passed the exam for the Northern Duke. Tom, hearing this, asks to stop because he already wants to go underground. The little girl says that she believes that he had his own reasons for entering the castle, and for now, all suspicions have been removed. The Duke thinks that she turned a blind eye to this quite easily, but he knows that perhaps he shouldn't say that. The young lady thinks that if he were a bad person, he would hardly save her. Hearing this, the man thought that she had said everything correctly, because initially it was possible not to save her or to finish her off at the same moment when she began to suspect, and it would have been much easier. Tom does not understand why he behaves so strangely with this woman. Klitsia turns to him and asks if he listens to her at all, because she forgot her sword with him. The Duke says that he kept it until she arrived, but first suggests finding her a better outfit that would not attract attention. The man looks out the window and says that it looks like the capital is busy today. The assistant agrees with him and says that, as expected, Ryan's information was false. Luke says that Xena HQ is currently suppressed, Eugene's main partner, Homer. Namely, his family became the financial backing for the creation of Tom's corporation. At one time, the Ruikin family managed the secret funds of the Servan Empire. And through these people, all financial affairs of the empire took place, and they were second only to the emperor. Hamar says it's hard to believe Xena would let someone like that get close to her so easily. Hamar is one of Xena's supporters, and his goal doesn't necessarily involve reviving the Servan Empire. The reason Tom Rurikan supports the rebel forces is so that one day he can revive Servana and become its ruler and make the Furt's empire pay. Tom wants revenge on Jan because he considers him a damned bastard and wants to rip out his heart with his own hands. The Duke says that unfortunately, he's not particularly smart in either politics or military affairs. He is just an entrepreneur who knows how to handle money. The gentleman believes that the most important quality of any entrepreneur is the ability to see the value and potential of each person. Homer turned to Tom Eugene and said that from that day on, he recognized him as the sole heir to their empire and would invest his time and money not in the empire at all, but in His Highness. In other words, Homer Rurikan did not rely on Servan's objections, but on the potential of one single person, Eugene. The gentleman said that he intended to personally observe what was happening and hoped that he would not get into trouble, because he believed that Eugene was not one of those who would be so easy to catch and therefore wanted everything to be in order. The servant reports that the young gentleman has returned and another lady is with him. Hearing this, the Duke is surprised because he does not understand what this means. And the servant explains that he has a girl in a prisoner's uniform with him. The assistant asks in surprise if it is by chance that she has red hair. The servant says that it is, and the master ordered her to prepare a bath and also to pick out clean clothes. Goethe screams and asks how to understand this, because she reminds him that he swore that he did not intend to be distracted from his main goal. Luke suggests that perhaps Mr. Eugene is already at the age to find himself a companion, and then asks if it is not critical, since after all, a young man is allowed to feel a little romance. At this time, Tom reflects on the fact that in the end, he had to bring her here because he understands that people can misunderstand him, but he couldn't leave her on the street. The gentleman thought that as soon as he returned the sword to her, it would be possible to break this strange connection. And then he looked at the weapon and thought that it was very old. The guy understands that the sword was well looked after, but time is merciless, and therefore he could assume that it is already over 100 years old. Tom reflects on the fact that everything clearly indicates that the blade is far from ordinary and could be patched up and modified, but he believes that this weapon could turn out to be a real treasure. The Duke does not understand how she could so carelessly forget him. At this time, a girl enters the room and tells the director that she is already finished. Tom thought that in the end, this sword was not even subject to him, and then looked at the baby and was surprised by her beauty. Klitsia says that a warm bath is the best thing that mankind has ever invented, and then thanks the director. He does not understand why this girl has suddenly changed so much. The man gives the lady a sword and says that she left it. The young lady thanks him, and he says that since the item is now in the owner's possession, she can return. The Duke says that since it is midnight, he will give her a guest room for the night. She thanks him and says that it is very kind of him. The main character asks if he could spare some time for her tomorrow, because it is very important to her. The next day, Klitsia took her ID from the thieves and happily said that all she had to do was withdraw the money, and she would finally be able to redeem the bail. Hearing this, the Duke thought that in fact this whole story with the debt was just a pretext to determine her identity, but he understands that simply refusing the money is now too suspicious. Tom understands that there is nothing to be done now, and all that remains is to take the money and forget about this misunderstanding, since he thinks that it is unlikely to be a burden for her, since she is a noblewoman. But Eugene didn't know yet that the bank he thought was the end of all the confusion would reveal an unexpected truth. The main character assures the bank teller that there is clearly some kind of mistake and asks him to check again. The worker claims that she checked several times, and there is no person named Klitsia listed among their clients. Megerino. The main character claims that she even has her ID with her. The worker explains that she has already checked several times, and only Isaac Megerino is listed in the Megerino family. The little girl claims that her name is definitely on the list, and the woman asks for a minute because she needs to check other families. Hearing this, the Count thought that if she is not on the list, then she is becoming more and more suspicious. The worker reports that Klitsia Megerino de Furza from the imperial family. Having heard this, girl thought that this was some kind of nonsense, because she knew for sure that only 2 brothers survived from the whole family. However, the main character assumes that theoretically, This is only possible if she is the empress, and suggests that maybe this is again a mistake in the documents. At this time, the Duke does not understand why Klitsia does not correct the worker, because she believes that this cannot be true. And the woman suggested that the young lady follow her. Sitting in the honorary guests' lounge of the bank, Sigrid, the little girl asks if she is sure she can be there. Madame Sigrid, the bank director, asks her not to worry, because she could not make the young lady wait in the main hall. The director wondered if the young lady was surprised, because they have a special reception and terms of cooperation for members of the imperial family. Madame reports that, to tell the truth, they didn't even know that they had a new empress. Hearing this, the little girl thought that she was just as confused as this woman. Klitsia does not understand why she is listed as the emperor's wife, and does not know whether this information can be disclosed, since she assumes that perhaps it was a state secret. The young lady reflects on the fact that no one warned her that this was a secret, and she does not understand why the emperor has not yet corrected all the documents. The headmistress looked at the girl and thought that perhaps this was secret information, and she should not question her, and then she said that Milady was not obliged to explain anything to her. The lady informs that regarding funds withdrawal from her bank account is unfortunately impossible at the moment. Hearing this, the girl asks in surprise why. The director explains that the depositor has calculated it for 20 years in advance. In other words, she will be able to withdraw money from the account either when she turns 30. The woman says that she can have the consent of the trustee Isaac Majorino, and he also added that under no circumstances should the rules regarding the withdrawal of money be violated. Hearing this, the main character remembered that her father told her that he trusted her completely and entirely. And then he explains that the thing is that she urgently needs cash. Milady wonders if there are any other options. The headmistress says that in that case, she has the right to withdraw money from the account of his legal spouse. Klitsia asks if she means the emperor, and the woman asks if they are married. The girl does not understand whether the empress has the right to withdraw state money without the ruler's knowledge. The woman explains that she has the right to do this only if it concerns the state budget, but the emperor's personal account is always available to his wife. The headmistress explains that, in addition, His Majesty's property is very large, so if she urgently needs money, she asks if she knows that the family code recognizes common property after marriage. Madame reports that, according to the state contract, the bank allows the spouses to manage this property, and if she wishes to withdraw money, they are ready to provide it right now from His Majesty's account. Hearing this, the main character was surprised and thought that if this is so, then they themselves started this whole mess, and the error arose due to the palace's miscalculation. The little girl understands that, moreover, they still haven't bothered to file for divorce, but she understands that by withdrawing the money, she is essentially agreeing to compensation. Klitsia doesn't understand whether it's worth living in exile for 10 years. Meanwhile, the Duke stands at the door and thinks about how he can't believe what awaits her. Tom remembers that the girl said that the Duke must be good in bed, and therefore understands that with each new meeting, she seems more and more strange and unusual. The man reflects on the fact that there are many suspicious moments hidden behind her eccentricity, and every time he begins to think that he has understood her, something inexplicable happens again. The Duke understands that every time this girl manages to surprise him, but suddenly the door opens and a young lady comes out and then asks for forgiveness for being late because she needed to get a card. When the gentleman saw the black card in her hands, he realized that this was a premium card from Secret Bank, intended exclusively for the most honorable clients. The black card can be used in almost any area, and it is said that in the entire Forza Empire, there are not even 10 of them. Klitsia tells the director that it is time for them to go, because there is still some business left. Hearing this, the head of the bank was surprised, because the young lady called that man the director. The woman thought that he was undoubtedly a man whose fortune was comparable to the budget of a small country, the director of the corporation Toma Holdings, Tom Rurikan. The head of the bank does not understand why such important people came to them at once, and therefore he thinks that today was a very lucky day. The assistant looked at His Majesty and thought that he was furious again, and that a record had been set this month. The emperor did not understand how the application was rejected and what he was talking about. Ian doesn't understand how they could reject it, and throws the paper in the assistant's face. Owen explains that the problem is that for several generations, there has not been a single recorded case of divorce in the imperial family. Miri reports that they recently discovered that the law requires the emperor and empress to be present in person to give their consent to a divorce. The count says that after which the certificate is sealed in a magical artifact. Having heard this, His Majesty does not understand why the hell they came up with all these ridiculous rules and asks about it. Owen believes that they were introduced to prevent the emperor from abusing his power. Ian suggests simply bringing Lady Klitsia. The assistant informs His Majesty that the ambassador to the Megerino family has arrived and reports that the Viscount's daughter has gone missing. Hearing this, the emperor screams and orders her to be found. His Majesty thought that she ran away to avoid exile and therefore believes that this girl took things to extremes, and he no longer cares that she is the daughter of that man. Ian remembers the red hair and the girl he recently met. He realized that Sir Isaac used fire magic in battle, and the girl was also used by this rune. The Emperor says that they need data to begin searching for his wife, and then asks Ryan if he has been to the Megerino estate. Ryan reports that she has red hair, almond-shaped eyes, a slightly round face, a naive expression, and is wearing a prison uniform. Yan says that this is a direct order from the Emperor, and therefore asks to refrain from jokes. However, the assistant claims that he is not joking and simply omits the point about the form. The Emperor asks his assistant why he hasn't left for the Viscount's estate yet. He explains that he hasn't had time to prepare since His Majesty gave the order just a couple of hours ago. The gentleman, screaming, says that he is leaving at once. Owen asks the Count if he is going to Isaac and if he can keep him company. Miri, surprised, asks Ryan if he wants to go with him too. He explains that he has personal business in Shamarin. Owen says that he has no reason to refuse. The secretary says that it is necessary to hand in the leaflets as quickly as possible, because this is an extremely urgent matter, and then reminds Count Miri that they are in a hurry and asks if he remembers about this. The assistant informs him that he is leaving all the affairs to Sir Hans and asks him not to let him down, and then informs him that the invoices for the work in the training hall have arrived and he needs to review and approve them. The secretary suggests finishing the work with the leaflets and sending them to headquarters, and then reminds them that this is a direct order from the Emperor and suggests not to delay and leaves. The assistant printed a wanted poster for an extremely important person and indicated that there would be a reward of 500,000 rubles for any information about this girl. At this time, the boy thought that today he was given 2 loaves of bread at once, and he understood that he could treat someone else. Suddenly, the guy was grabbed by the shirt by the gentleman who had thrown bread at him last time and claimed that he had caught a little rat. The boy asks if he is the same gentleman who was beaten up last time. The man asks if he remembers him, and then says that he will somehow catch the red-haired bastard. The gentleman hit the boy, and at the same time claimed that he would pay for his humiliation. The boy felt pain and screamed, and then asked to save him. Suddenly, a girl with red hair appeared and quickly dealt with the attacker. She says that if he had appeared in her region, she would have broken his legs. Klitsia says that let this idiot consider himself extremely lucky. The gentleman's assistant says in surprise that they were not warned that this boy was protected by the nobles. The boy thanked his lady for saving him, and she, surprised, asks if he remembers her, and then reminds him that it was he who shared his bread with her. The young man asks in surprise if she is that older brother, and the lady smiles and asks why he is so surprised. At this time, the Duke thought that at first he waited while the miss was filling out the card, and now he was dragging after her down the street and did not understand why he was doing this. The boy asks if he should call her mistress, and the young lady smiles and suggests that he just call her sister because she thinks that nothing has changed. Klitsia gave the boy a bag of money and said that it was more than enough to get to Shamarin, and then showed that there was also a letter there. The girl says that with him, he will be allowed into any establishment, and later, she will be able to take him to work in their estate. The guy asks in surprise why she is doing this. The main character strokes the boy on the head and says that she understands that life was not easy for him in his native land, and then apologizes for sending him back to Shamarin. The young lady claims that this is the only place where she can help him, and then asks him to wait for her there and asks if he understands. The Duke, surprised, says that she is very kind to this boy and asks if she had previously known him. Milady explains that she simply repaid him with bread for bread. The gentleman was surprised and then said that despite her high-born position, it was clear from the very first meeting that she was very different from ordinary aristocrats. Tom says that he met a noblewoman who knows martial arts for the first time. The little girl explains that since childhood, she has often been to the front. The main character says that she probably did not notice class inequality because of her irresponsibility, because her title closed her eyes to the difficulties that ordinary people go through. The girl claims that thanks to this title, she can now at least somehow help them. Suddenly, she apologized because she thought she had chatted too much. Klitsia assures that this time she will definitely be able to pay him back. Hearing this, the man thought that she bears an imperial family name and has taken part in the war of 2 empires since childhood. The man reflects on the fact that she owns a rare fire rune and also managed to escape from prison and now has also received a black card. Tom thinks that what is more important to him is what connection she has with the Emperor, but he understands that he does not want to let her go and does not know how to keep her. Klitsia says that it is time for them to go. The Duke reminds him that he has already scored more than 90 points and asks if that is true. She agrees with him and asks which of these. The girl remembered that she said that if he gets these points, he will be able to bear the title of Northern Duke, and then she will gladly allow you to be kidnapped. Tom states that he got 95 points and asks if that means he passed the test, and then reminds her that she also noted that he would allow her to be kidnapped. The Duke looks the little girl in the eyes and asks what she will say, and also wonders if her offer is still valid. The main character objects. The young lady explains that jokes are jokes, but she cannot really allow herself to be kidnapped. He reminds her that she has already given permission for this to happen. The little girl asks what suddenly came over him, and the man explains that he was interested in Milady. The girl asks if this happened right after she got the black card. Tom objects and claims that this is not the case at all, because he is afraid that they will stop maintaining contact as soon as the debt is paid. The gentleman says that he wants to get to know her better, but there is an insurmountable wall between them, and then he asks if there is no other way out for them. The main character turns around and leaves, and the man asks where she is going, and at that moment he thought that he had not said everything yet. The girl says that she wants to go to the bank. Klitsia spent her entire childhood on the battlefield. Later, she enjoyed a quiet life on the family estate and graduated from the academy with honors. The young lady has read over 100 novels about the Northern Duke as part of her academic work, but she understands that there is zero real relationship. The young girl perceived him as unkind, believing that his awareness of his good looks was now prompting him to try to win her over. Meanwhile, the guy wondered if she herself might not be interested in this. The main character thinks that she really likes his face, and therefore thinks that maybe she should agree. Tom decides that nothing matters to him because he won't let her go anyway. The young lady thinks that she should get ready because she didn't come to the capital for the sake of romance. She turns to the director and tells him that she understands his feelings, but right now she is busy with something important. Suddenly, the paper covered the girl's face, and I saw that on this paper was her photograph and a wanted poster. The boy who was selling newspapers screamed and said that the girl with red hair and almond-shaped eyes was currently in hiding. The guy screams and says that she is wanted for committing several serious crimes. He also warns that the wanted person has great strength. The newspaper seller asks people to be careful if they see this girl. He also said that this is an urgent order from the imperial family and a very large reward. At this time, Ryan woke up Count Miri, who was sleeping in the carriage, and said that as an imperial advisor, he should be stronger. Miri claims that they have been racing at full speed for a week and asks what else he expected. Then she says that she finds the long journey very difficult. Ryan says that there was no point in sitting in the carriage the whole way, and that one should at least sometimes sit on a horse and breathe fresh air. He thought that for such long horse rides, one also needs stamina. Ryan says he thinks this is where their paths will diverge. Hearing this, the Count reminds him that he said he had personal business in Shukrim, and then asks what exactly brought him here to such a remote place. Hearing this, the man thought that he could only say that he needed to check on a certain point. Miri reflected on the fact that he did not remember ever leaving the capital voluntarily. The Count understands that he needs to focus on his task because he has covered almost the entire distance, and now only one important matter remains. Mr. Isaac reports that he was expecting Count Miri's arrival and is glad to greet him, then coughed. The man apologizes for his poor health. Owen assures that everything is fine because he understands how hard it is for the gentleman now, and then says that he came to find out when the last time his daughter was home. Isaac reports that since her disappearance, his health has deteriorated. The Count looked at the patient and realized that his complexion was fine, and his head was hastily bandaged. The gentleman says that he can't even get out of bed, and then coughs. The Count thought that it was in his own interests to find his daughter, and doesn't understand what this circus is about. Meanwhile, Isaac hopes that this guest will not suspect anything. The man asks if there are any suggestions where his daughter might have gone. Miri wonders if he knows at least the direction. The man replies that he doesn't know because she left in the middle of the night and his heart can't take it, and that's why he wants her to be found. Owen asks for forgiveness, and then says that he is forced to say this because according to the law of their empire, relatives of the imperial family are obliged to take all measures to protect them. The Count claims that this means he must use all available resources to search for Lady Klitsia, and then he reminds her that she is the Emperor's wife, and therefore, as a father, he must help them. Isaac explains that only he and his daughter live in this estate, and they have few servants, and hardly any of them are capable of conducting searches. Hearing this, the Count objects and claims that they have people, because the Order of the Knights of the Red Lion serves under his command. The man says in surprise that his order was disbanded immediately after the end of the war, and now everything is different. Owen wonders if the Viscount has the right to reassemble it. Isaac asks if that is not the case, and the guest claims that he is the one. The Count says that even if there is a mistake in the documents, at the moment, Lady Klitsia is the Emperor's wife, and this cannot be taken lightly. Owen reports that they were very much counting on his cooperation, and will therefore provide all the necessary resources themselves. The Viscount says that as soon as he gets better, he will start working, because now he is not feeling well. Isaac doesn't understand how he, a feeble old man, can gather the knights again, because his heart hurts terribly, and he doesn't understand why his daughter did this to him. Suddenly, the Count, who was sitting on a chair, fainted and explained this fainting spell by fatigue from the journey. The Count explains that he suddenly felt dizzy because the journey was too long. The gentleman says that in any case, the Viscount will have to obey the imperial decree. Hearing this, the man says that he has a bad heart, and then lies down on the bed and looks sad. Owen, lying on the floor, says that his eyes are getting dark, and at this time, the maids do not understand how to help the masters. After all, they both felt ill at the same time. At this time, the knights, walking around the streets, shouting, announce that they have an emergency warrant for the arrest of Klitsia. The guards say that if anyone sees this woman with red hair, they should immediately notify the city guard. Tom, while in the alley, says that he thinks he can take a rest there, because he thinks it's safer there. The little girl looked at the ad and said that this knight is blonde, and she will strangle him. Hearing this, the man realized that she was talking about the Emperor's brother, and then said that the situation was not easy, and asked if she had a place to hide. Klitsia looked at the guy and asked if his offer was still valid. In a few minutes, the young people found themselves in the capital's port. The main character was surprised because she saw the largest port of the capital and many ships. She became interested in why everything turned out this way. The young lady reflects on how she was first very unfairly put behind bars, which is why she had to escape, although she understands that she is also a little guilty. The little girl thinks that maybe she did something wrong, but she doesn't understand if this is a reason to declare a search. Klitsia does not understand why the master's assistant is looking at her so closely and assumes that he does not trust her. At this time, Luke is thinking about the fact that the girl who won the master's heart turned out to be a fugitive criminal, and now things are not easy. Tom says that they will sail on a ship. Hearing this, the main character thought that now she can only trust this man. The girl asks the director if they have to swim across the sea, because she thought that it would be enough to wait in some secluded place. The little girl reminds him that he is the head of a large holding company and probably has a lot of shelters even in the capital. He assures that this is problematic. The Duke reports that the reward for her capture is too high, and that in order to hide her, he would have to contact third parties. The man believes that some of them will certainly be tempted by such a sum, and none of those people can be trusted completely. Tom says that it is possible that even on the way to the port they were followed by tails, and therefore suggests that they hurry. The lady asks in surprise if his ship is ready and where they will sail. The gentleman says that they will cross the ocean on his ship and offers to trust him. Hearing this, the little girl was surprised and asked if this boat could sail that far. The director smiled and then showed a large ship that belonged to him. He explained that the ship was equipped with a powerful magical engine. Tom says that this ship can accommodate more than 1,000 people because there are hundreds of cabins and all kinds of entertainment. Theaters, restaurants, conference halls, and so on. The girl asks in surprise if they will really sail on this giant without other passengers. Jan assures her that this will be the case, and then takes her hand and tells her that this flight is intended only for her, my lady. Klitsia tried not to show it, but in recent days her condition was extremely depressed. After all, she has outstanding courage and willpower. These qualities help the main character to face any challenges and not lose hope. But more and more difficulties continued to fall on the young lady's head, from marriage to being declared wanted. When the lady boarded the ship, she felt that she could take a rest, because such a series of events would have exhausted anyone. And finally, she was able to breathe deeply. The surprised count asks Milady what she is doing, and then asks her to be careful, because it could be dangerous. The little girl replies that this is every girl's dream, and thinks that it's probably strange to ask this now. The lady asks if he is afraid that helping a wanted fugitive is risking his reputation too much. Klitsia believes that the capital will pay attention to the sudden departure of such a vessel. Tom asks Togo how about discussing all this at the table. He says that at the moment they are not in any danger. The man says that his ship is on an exclusive route regulated by the First Empire, and therefore there is no reason to worry. The gentleman says that in addition, they are sailing to a popular place among clients, the Duchy of Floria, which is the only point in the entire empire that has autonomy. Hearing this, the little girl screams and says that in the newspaper, Empire for Every Day, they wrote that it is definitely worth visiting at least once in your life. The girl knows that this place is on the list of the most popular resort areas and also for honeymoons. The gentleman turns to Milady and asks if it is possible that she will finally reveal her true identity to him, because he wants to know it. Tom says that if the girl he helps ends up being folded by the empress, then he really is risking a lot. Hearing this, the little girl realized that he really helped her a lot, and therefore she thinks there is no longer much point in hiding it. And then she agrees. Floria Island is located south of the mainland of Ashi, with a mild climate all year round, emerald sea, soft waves, and coral islands. People call it paradise on earth, without exaggeration, and everyone dreams of visiting it at least once in their life. The young lady took off her shoes and ran with delight along the white sand and enjoyed it. Klitsia says that the newspaper wasn't lying, because the sand there really is soft as silk, and besides, it's the first time she's seen so many shells. The man realized that it seemed she was now going to call him Duke. He reminded her that running barefoot on the beach was dangerous, and the girl tells him not to worry, because she thinks that she has strong feet and everything will be fine. A few minutes later, Milady fell down and asked why the hell they put a pole on the shore. The gentleman with blonde hair says that he feels awkward about this, and then extends his hand to help her. The stranger asks if she is hurt. The little girl looks at this man and thinks that he is the 12th prince of Floria Andrew. The Duke informs her that the great Prince of Floria is in front of her. The main character informs her that it is an honor to meet such an outstanding person. The prince smiled and suggested that formalities be omitted, since in Floria, everything is not so strict. And then Andrew greeted his brother. The girl asks the Duke in surprise if he knows the local prince. He explains that they have a business relationship and have known each other for a long time. The prince, surprised, says that now he understands that she is the companion of his dear friend, and then gives her a flower in her hair. The gentleman says that there is a golden hibiscus growing in Floria, and he thinks that it complements her fiery red hair perfectly. and then they are greeted with joy. Andrew claims that their holiday will be unforgettable because he will do everything for their comfort. The Duke thought that he was back to his old ways as soon as he saw the girl. Tom does not think that he satisfies Milady's preferences because she likes the image of the Northern Duke, and he knows about it. Klitsia asks the gentleman what he means by an unforgettable vacation. Hearing this, the man smiles and asks if she can't wait. Andrew recommends visiting the night market, and the little girl asks if he doesn't mind accompanying them because he thinks it will be more fun together. Tom reminds the young lady that it is time for them to go to their lodgings, since her current outfit is not very suitable for these places, and therefore suggests choosing something better. The main character thought that she would need to pick something to match the color of the hibiscus. The prince, watching the girl, thought that he had not expected such a turn of events. At the Rukin mansion in Floria, a few minutes later, the prince came to visit them, and the gentleman was surprised. Tom says that not even 30 minutes have passed since they separated. The Duke asks if the prince has any important business. He assures that all state affairs have been done for today and suggests that his friend not be so cold-blooded. The fair-haired guy asks where his companion is, who made an unforgettable impression on him. Tom explains that she went shopping and she enjoys choosing outfits, and so she will be late. The prince says he is sorry because he wanted to admire her beauty once more. Tom wonders if he came only because of her. Andrew believes that even though times have changed, he wonders if he dares to lay claim to the woman of His Highness Servan. The young gentleman insists that she is not his wife at all, and asks why he thought so. And the prince says that he won't poke his nose into their relationship, and then it is reported that he has heard interesting rumors. Andrew says that it looks like there was a commotion in the emperor's palace, and then asks if it was his doing. The blonde assures that what happens on the mainland doesn't really concern him, since he has enough of his own things to do. The prince says that he wishes to remain neutral, and Floria is their beautiful pearl, and he will not allow her to become a victim of imperial intrigues. Meanwhile, at the estate, Mezzarino Viscount asks the count if he can stop this surrealism. Owen asks in surprise what he is talking about, because he can barely make out what he is saying. Eisen thought that this bastard had been lying in bed for several weeks and hadn't moved. Miri thinks that he is comfortable and can lie like this all his life because he has no work. Suddenly, a maid bursts into the room and addresses the master. He asks in surprise what is the matter, and she says that a letter has arrived from the capital. The maid reports that the young lady has been declared wanted with a reward of 500,000 ruels. Hearing this, the Duke got out of bed because he was so interested in the letter, and he wanted to read it himself. The maid says that, moreover, it is reported that she was spotted in the middle of the night at the port with a suspicious man. The Viscount asks in surprise what kind of man they are talking about, because he doesn't understand anything. The woman explains that so far all that is known is that they boarded a ship belonging to Toma Holdings. The Duke quickly got out of bed and said that things looked like they were heading for trouble. Owen claims that he will immediately return to the capital and take responsibility. The Viscount says that sometimes freedom and wandering are necessary for growth, but he trusts his daughter. Isaac claims that he didn't want to get involved personally, but since some bastard has picked on his daughter, he can't sit idly by. The gentleman orders that everything be prepared for departure immediately because he is going to the capital to search for his only daughter, for whom he is very worried. While Count Miri headed to the estate of Viscount Mezzarino, captain of the guard, Ryan made his way to the Shumaran Academy. Klitsia Mezzarino, the girl who became an empress by a stupid mistake. The man claims that at their first meeting, he thought that there was nothing to worry about. Ryan doesn't understand how she knows Eugene. Servant, and besides, there is also some connection between his brother and her father. The young gentleman thinks that he only needs to find the missing details, and the best way to do this is to conduct his own investigation. The Marquise greeted the gentleman and asked if he had come about Sis Gaetzi, Cornelia Professor of Mathematics at the Academy, and also the current president. Ryan reports that he is pleased to meet the head of the Northern Duchy Research Center. The Duke knows that in the official documents, only 2 lines were written about Klitsia, a graduate of the architecture department of the Shumaran Academy, and also the founder of the scientific community, CSG. This is a mysterious community, the goals of which are unclear. Everything suggests that this is an ordinary student interest group, and the young gentleman became interested in whether this is true. He reports that he is the captain of the palace guard. Cornelia claims that in them, in CSG, the personality of a person is not as important as his ardor and interest in scientific research, and freedom of scientific thought is the fundamental right of all citizens of the empire. The woman believes that even the emperor's power cannot suppress her because she does everything perfectly. Hearing this, the gentleman does not understand what is happening and asks why she is saying all this. The headmistress reminds him that he requested information about the activities and a list of all members of the SIG, but they cannot so easily reveal to him the results of their work. Madam asks what his goal is. Ryan thought that he didn't really expect to learn anything important, but it seems that this is not an ordinary organization. The man believes that first, it is necessary to find out its main essence, and then says that his goal is the same as her research, because he has always been interested in the topics that they study here. The gentleman asks if there is a more effective community in this area in the entire empire, and then suggests conducting an entrance test. The blonde insists that this is a basic knowledge test, and she wants to make sure that he fits into their community, and at that time, he thought that this provincial professor thinks that there is a need to conduct a test for him. The man reflects on the fact that even the best minds of the capital's academy recognized him as a genius, and the lady asks the first question and suggests choosing the right combination of colors. The professor started to watch the clock, and the gentleman thought that this was some kind of code, because these color combinations contained a hidden meaning, and therefore he would have to choose at random. Ryan realizes that he has never heard of such tests, and therefore thinks that he just needs to choose one option. The woman says that time is up, and he did not pass, because he was thinking for a long time. The lady says that the test is over. The young man asks her to wait, and asks if the question is asked correctly. Cornelia submitted a scientific paper on geometry at the age of 11, and proved Kertma's theorem at the age of 14. At the age of 17, the scientific community recognized her as a genius and awarded her the status of a scientist. However, she turned down prestigious jobs in the capital, and instead chose to remain at the small Shumaran academy. According to rumors, a certain area of research has caught her interest. Ryan claims that there is an error in it and wonders if the question should not be followed by an explanation. The man explains that she told him to choose the right combination of colors, but did not even explain what they meant. Cornelia invites him to listen, and then asks if he really wants to join CISC without knowing even the basics. She hopes that he has at least some potential as a researcher. The lady says that so be it, but for zeal, she will give only one chance and suggests mastering the basics on your own, and then try to pass the test again. The professor says that this is the door of truth that opens only to those who are ready to give themselves to knowledge. While in the library, Ryan thought that this paper was the numbering of the books in the library, and he carefully checked all the numbers because he thought that this was the correct answer. An extremely mysterious community that produces no research results and has a strict process for accepting new members. The gentleman does not understand how such a serious organization settled in this backwater, and he understands that the further it goes, the more interesting it becomes. The man decides to start the first book, which was called The Immortal Love of the Duke of the Northern Lands. Ryan thought about how, in addition to his main position as captain of the guard, he owned vast lands in the north of the empire as a duke. After reading several books, the young gentleman thought about how much time he had spent in the library and realized how stupid he had been in the face of great science. Ryan muses that in that case, he should compete to defend his right as the true northern duke. At this time, the emperor asks his assistant why his brother went with Miri. However, the secretary assures that he knows nothing, because the lord did not tell him anything. While one of them was first revealing the importance of his title, the other northern duke was enjoying a beautiful night and having a good time walking around the Floria night market. The duke turns to Milady and asks her to slow down, and she suggests that he keep up. The man asks if she likes this place and thinks that she is delighted. The girl says that she really likes the night market because it is so romantic and atmospheric, and she really likes the dress because she doesn't understand how it can be so beautiful, light, and comfortable at the same time. The main character asks the man if he wants to change his clothes himself and thinks that it is worth choosing a more suitable outfit for him so that he too would feel comfortable and convenient. Tom assures that everything is fine. Suddenly, the little girl saw a crowd of people, and she became curious about what was going on there, and then quickly ran. The Duke thought that she was like a little child, but he believed that a little childishness would not hurt, and then he quickly ran after her so that she would not get lost. The actor says that this is a puppet theater, and today there is a story that they will tell, and it will be the legend of the great dragon Ashi. Long ago, when the world was filled with monsters, the dragon Ashi wanted to help defenseless humanity. So, together with their friend Kukas, they created a safe land for children. As a sign of their love for the human race, they gave them a sign of communication, a flower capable of fulfilling wishes. The girl says that this story is very similar to the one of the Queen's Empire. Klitsia understands that some details are different, and the guy says that this is because the island of Floria also belongs to the continent of Ashi, and that is why this is the story. Tom reports that all the mainland countries, including his, have different versions of Ashi's dragon. Milady asks if the Duke is not originally from their empire. The man explains that he grew up in a rather poor region as a child, and then says that in any case, the theater has come to an end, and it is time for them to return. The main character says that in their story, the law of promise was a flower and their sword, and then asks if it's interesting. But in response, the guy just remained silent. The gentleman thought that he had almost given himself away. Eugene Weiner does not exist, because his name is Toma Rurikin, and he is the natural one. The man thought that in his sleep and while awake, he had been telling himself this thought so that he would never reveal his true identity. And he did not understand how this could happen. Suddenly, the little girl saw a crowd of people and asked if a fight was starting there, and suggested that it looked like they were holding a martial arts competition and that it was a tradition. The man claims that you can't use runes and equipment, but only pure physical force, and whoever can't continue the battle or is outside the lease loses. The main character understands that, in fact, this is the only type of battle that their pacifist king approved of. And people were grateful for this, because it was an opportunity to have some fun. The man screams and asks which of them is ready to challenge the martial arts genius Reuben. Then he suggests that they come out if they are not cowards. The Duke tells the lady that he doesn't think she'll be interested in watching, but the girl quickly stands in front of the man and claims that she simply has to win him over. Hearing this, the stranger was surprised and said that she was cute, and then claimed that if she wanted to play, she should look for another place. The man says that you can get hurt here, and the main character says that she would like the man to close because the finale will show everything. People screamed and said that it looked like something interesting was brewing, because this lady had a sharp tongue, and they became interested in whether she was really a noble woman. The man attacked the main character with his strong fists, but she quickly dodged, and a fight began. The girl dodged so quickly that Reuben couldn't even touch her, although he tried very hard. The man asks if he just wants to hurt such a cutie, and at that moment, Reuben looks at her face and thinks that she is not even trying. The man does not understand where such a small body gets so much strength, because she can handle everything she loves. And at this time, the main character thought that even though she was playing, she couldn't swing along. Klitsia knows she shouldn't finish too quickly, otherwise she'll upset the audience, and she thinks she's finally got a chance to let off some steam. A man from the crowd asks Reuben if he really decided to lose to this skinny girl, and then angrily reminds him that he bet money on him. The man angrily asks how dare he speak to him like that, and then claims that he is Reuben, a martial arts genius, and then turns around to hit my lady. Suddenly, the man used the wind rune, but the main character dodged even this attack. Suddenly, the Duke decided to intervene in this fight, and with one blow dug Reuben into the ground. Tom says that Reuben is a bastard who just used a rune. Then he asks if using runes isn't against the rules. The little girl claims that she had everything under control, and the Duke then suggests declaring the girl the winner because he believes that it is her right. The organizer explains that the point is that anyone who enters the circle automatically becomes a participant in the battle, and now the competition is between the two of them. At this time, in the Academy's assembly hall, the headmistress says that it is impressive because no one has ever managed to get the maximum score on the entrance exam. In fact, the difficulty of the CISG exam is not that great, and it is enough to just cram a huge amount of literature and learn the order in which they are located. A woman congratulates student Ryan, and he thanks the professor and says that he hopes for productive cooperation because his dream has come true. Clarence says that she will briefly tell them about the activities of their society, and then she says that they strive to collect and thoroughly study the relevant literature. Ryan says he has a question and asks if they could tell him about the Great Purge. The woman asks in surprise how it is possible not to know such basic things. The professor turns to the girl and asks her to answer the question because he hopes that she knows. The lady reports that the Great Purge of events occurred in the 3rd year of Emperor Yang's reign. Queen. Milady says that their current emperor ascended to the throne at the age of 16, and immediately after the end of the war with Servan. The high nobility was extremely outraged by this fact, which led to constant assassination attempts and attempts to overthrow the emperor, but it ended with the Marquis being left without his noble titles. The girl reports that this is what is called the Great Purge, because since then, there have been no titles higher than Count left in the Queen's empire. The gentleman asks if there might have been exceptions, since he is confused. The student explains that only 2 families managed to escape the consequences of that affair, and the exception was the Duke of the House of Lequenois, who retained his loyalty to the emperor. The lady says that there is also a duke from the House of Bartier, who also bears the surname de Ferza. Ryan asks who is the head of the House of Bartier. The girl replies that this is the emperor's younger brother, Duke Ryan Bartier, who is also a handsome man. The gentleman claims that the girl is well erudite and asks what lands belong to the duke. The student replies that these are the northeastern borders of the empire, including the Zir Range, and then says that she was there, and these lands are very beautiful. The duke reports that it turns out that he is Ryan Bartier and is the great duke of the north that she has been so desperately looking for. Hearing this, the women were surprised, because none of them even suspected this. The professor claims that he is not suitable because a duke must have black hair. However, Ryan says that in fact he is a duke. The headmistress says that this is not true because he has blue eyes, not red, and besides, his character does not at all correspond to the northern duke. Suddenly, there is a noise in the classroom. The professor orders the student Ryan to sit down and stop this nonsense. The lady says that since we've finished with the greetings, she's announcing the schedule. The woman says that attendance is mandatory for all community members, and this especially applies to newcomers, whose membership may be revoked if they fail to appear. The duke says he has a question, and then asks if this is timed to coincide with the founding of the empire. The director explains that the day of the seminar coincides with this holiday, and this is a long-standing tradition. Hearing this, the captain of the guard was surprised, and the woman explained that the venue was the main hall on the 4th floor. He thought that he could not leave the palace on such an important day. At this time in the city of Muta, a worker looks at the horse in surprise and does not understand how he eats so much meat, because no matter how much he looks, he is still amazed. At this time, the horse thought that this was delicious, and when the owner left him here, at first he was a little upset and yearned for her. The animal reflects on the fact that, for now, he cannot work and still get meat 3 times a day and thinks that this is heaven on earth. The groom calculated his expenses and thought that Klitsia's debt was growing and growing. The worker reports that a group of travelers also dropped by, and it looks like the horse is also a hybrid. Shukrim looked at the hybrid horse and realized that it was Alexander, and he asked in surprise if he shouldn't be with Klitsia. The animals explain that it so happened that he must wait for her here, and then asks what brought him here. Suddenly, the Viscount entered the stable. Isaac and Miri successfully reached Muta, but Miri urgently needed to rest at the hotel. The Viscount asks where they got this horse from, and the man explains that he is here as collateral. The gentleman, having heard this information, realized that his daughter owed 50,000 rubles. The man claims that, in addition to this, all expenses for the maintenance of the collateral property are added to the total debt. The groom explains that every day he eats meat enough for 25 people. Hearing this, the father was surprised, because she had thought of giving Shukrim as collateral. The Viscount thought that his daughter should be responsible for her own actions, and the man asked in surprise whether this meant that he did not intend to do anything. The groom explains that it was the horse that caused all the damage, and that is why its owner is in such debt, and then asks if he wants to pay off the debt with the horse. Isaac says that he is far from an ordinary steed, and that he is a very rare and powerful creature capable of pulling several carts without stopping. The gentleman claims that if she were sent, for example, to a coal mine, her strength would replace a whole group of adult men, and therefore the master would always be the winner. Hearing this, Shukrim asks Alexander to stop his master. The animal asks how he should do it, and then says that he can't. Alexander explains that only those in whose veins the blood of the dragon flows are able to talk to them. After all, only she can understand them, and also help in any situation. At this time, the main character turns to the Duke and says that they finally have the opportunity to fight, and then asks if he can handle it. The gentleman says that he can play along with her, and then asks if she is sure about this, because he is not used to giving in. The girl realized that she couldn't lose her vigilance because she had to win. Tom looked at Milady and realized that she was damn strong, and understood that if she was too careless, she would regret it. But of course, this did not mean that he would seriously fight her. The man thought that he would not back down too easily, and at that moment, the presenter announced that they could begin. An even larger crowd of people gathered around who wanted to see this show. The Duke realized that she was preparing to kick him because she raised her leg, and then he grabbed her knee. She asked in surprise what he was doing. The man turns to Milady and says that you shouldn't throw your leg over like that, because everything is visible. She takes advantage of this opportunity and hits him. The residents smile and say that this woman is amazing, because this guy lasted less than Reuben. They do not understand how such a fragile lady managed to cope with them. At this time, in the port of Floria, the lady asks the Duke if he is very upset about yesterday, and then says that she is ashamed that she hit him when he was distracted. The girl says that she didn't know that he would fall from one blow. The guy suggests that she not worry because it's his own fault that he let his guard down. Tom asks Milady what she intends to do next. She explains that, as he already knows, due to a mistake in the documents, she is temporarily considered empress. Klitsia says that when she went to the capital to sort everything out, she managed to end up behind bars, and she understands that if she continues to sit here, the problems will not resolve themselves. The little girl says that she is therefore thinking about returning to the capital. Suddenly, she sees a pirate flag on the ship and shows it to the Duke in surprise. The gentleman explains that they received special permission from the ruler to enter the local waters, and therefore suggests not to worry, because this island is a neutral zone. The pirate is a brave warrior who keeps in his heart love only for one single ruler of the seas. Milady invites the Duke to go to them. Hearing this, the man thought that she realizes that she is always drawn to the problem, and then says that she thinks it is possible, but does not know how to approach them, because there are many people there. A young lady saw many poor people near the ships, and asked in surprise if they were pirates. The gentleman explained that they were refugees. After the Great War, many residents lost their homes and lands, and people who could not settle anywhere now live on ships, because who would want to take in a bunch of hungry mouths? Klitsia asks why they have this flag. The man explains that they have no citizenship, and so they have to wear a pirate flag, so that real pirates don't bother them. Luckily, the king of Floria understands their situation, and even supplies them with supplies. The ruler of the Furts accepted all surviving citizens as subjects of his empire. It was stated that no one would be expelled from their native lands, and the main character does not understand why refugees appeared, because they are having a hard time. The lady asks the girl if she is a noblewoman, and then wonders if the troubles of war can bypass absolutely everyone. The woman says that someone always benefits, and someone loses everything, because she doesn't understand where the emperor gets the resources to help absolutely all the inhabitants. The marquise claims that even if people start to complain, she doesn't know what to do when Furza has already seized their lands. She doesn't know if there are lands without poor people. The lady apologizes for chatting, and then says that if they have seen enough, then let them step, because this is the reality of this world. Jan Fursa, who maintains the image of a war hero and noble ruler, but his true essence is that all people in the conquered lands are rightfully considered subjects of Fursa. Klitsia says that Emperor Fursa personally declared that all people in the conquered lands were rightfully considered subjects of Fursa, and also said that every citizen of the empire had the right to a safe life. Hearing this, the man asks if he could have said anything else. The main character points her finger at the man and asks to sell him. Tom turns to Milady and explains that for refugees who have no home, It will be a good shelter, and Thabo is a miracle of marine engineering and an important link in Tom's fleet. The gentleman explains that it costs at least 20 million rubles, and at that moment, the girl shows a black card and says that she will pay immediately. Thus, the owner of Tom Rukin's ship is Klitsia. She turns to the strangers and informs them that from now on, this ship will be their home. The young lady says that this is the grace of His Imperial Majesty John Ferza, and therefore the ship will henceforth be called John Ferza. Eugene had many times the desire to object, for example, because of the embezzlement of money from the emperor's personal account, because the refugees had transferred the pirate flag to their new ship. But what bothered Eugene more than anything else was that the people greeted him with shouts, Ferza, and wished the king a long life, and also called him the King of the Seas. The refugees' cries are dubious and even dangerous. The Duke realized that he could now legally bring charges against John Ferza, and believes that such an opportunity cannot be missed. At this time, Lord Robert screams and calls for Count Miri, because he does not understand where the Count is now. The secretary explains that he went to Shumarin on a business trip and will return soon. Hearing this, the assistant fell to the floor and screamed, saying that it couldn't be, and the lady, surprised, asked the Lord what had happened and what the problem was. The man explains that someone withdrew 25 million rubles from His Majesty's account. Hearing this, the lady was surprised, because she did not understand who dared to touch the emperor's property. The Lord says that the money was withdrawn from a black card issued in the joint ownership of the spouses. In other words, the fugitive lady Mejerine spends the emperor's money. When the lady came to His Majesty, they did not understand why the emperor looked as if he already wanted to finish someone off. The Lord thinks that, as luck would have it, he has an audience scheduled today, and understands that if he reports to him now that the money has disappeared, trouble will be inevitable. The man understands that His Majesty will definitely finish them off. Lady Clarence asks if they have a report for the emperor. The woman asks if they have problems again. The Lord says that there are very serious matters and asks if the lady is in a good mood. Clarence announces that the long-awaited guest has arrived and therefore offers to greet Isaac Mejerino, with whom Miri arrived. The Lord, together with the secretary, is trying to say that His Majesty is being robbed and that Lady Mejerino has opened a black card and is now throwing money around. Isaac is a former knight of the King's Guard. He gained recognition on the battlefield and bravely led the Order of the Red Lion. After the end of the war, the Viscount was granted a noble title and lands of Shumarin, and in the Mejerino family, only the Viscount himself and his only daughter remained. However, judging by His Majesty's reaction, there is clearly something else. Earl Owen reports his arrival, and the Viscount says that he has brought it by order of His Majesty. Suddenly, the gentleman saw that his sword had disappeared, and said that he was sure that he would ignore his words as usual, and then asked if he really had free time this time. Isaac claims that this is a misunderstanding, and then asks if he dares to ignore His Majesty's orders and defend himself with weapons. The Viscount says that it seems that in his absence, the Emperor has greatly improved his fencing skills. And at this time, the subjects do not understand what is happening, because they are seeing this for the first time. Clarissa quietly says that Count Miri must not be aware, and then says that Sir Isaac once taught the Emperor fencing, and that it was 20 years ago, right before the war began. The woman says that he refused the post of Commander-in-Chief of the Firt's army, and the Servan army has already crossed the borders of Roxen. The little emperor said that the truce concluded in Recanois will soon disappear, as he understands that they are literally on the brink of war. The boy claims that even his father said that their army needs a strong general, and then asks where he is going to go, leaving the capital in such a situation. Isaac assures His Highness that he is not throwing, and that his ball still faithfully serves the Firt's empire, and that he will do everything in his power to protect it, wherever he is. John Viskrikivaya asks why, and then claims that he was always there from the moment of his birth, but is unable to even explain the reason for his departure. The man explains that his beloved is carrying a child under her heart, and therefore asks His Highness to forgive his unworthy servant. The Emperor says that he never knows how everything will turn out, because that same daughter became his formal wife. Isaac asks how they could make such a mistake in the documents. At this time, Clarissa watched them and thought that the atmosphere was much better than she expected, because 20 years ago he swore that he would kill Isaac at the next meeting. Miri was surprised to hear this, and then asked the lady how old she was, if she knew what had happened once and interested him, but the woman remained silent in response. The emperor says that Miri managed to chop wood again, and the master looked at the drawing and said that it was not successful because he could not recognize his daughter in it. John thinks that it seems that this is why director Tom sailed to Floria, and therefore understands that in this case it will not be difficult to bring her, and then says that he will order everything to be prepared. The gentleman turns to His Majesty and asks if he will sail to Floria with him, because he believes that then they will need the presence of a priest. The emperor claims that the palace cannot be left empty, and then says that he will guard it and keep order. The subordinates ask His Majesty in surprise whether he wants to entrust the Viscount with imperial powers, and consider this unthinkable, and therefore propose to reconsider the decision. Ian claims that he cannot trust the palace to this idiot Ryan, because there are no direct descendants or other members of the Ferd's family left. The emperor says that the closest person to his family is Isaac, and that he is the one he trusts the most, and then asks if he is wrong. The gentleman says with a laugh that he is the king of pirates, and there is no one who has not heard this proud name, John. Jan Furza not only gave the pirates a luxurious ship, but also sent them so much food that it would last for several years. He asks where else one can encounter such miracles of generosity. The man claims that his brother and the young lady have let their guard down, and he replies that it's not just because of that woman, but because there was just a small hitch with the financing of the plan. The gentleman explains that the purchase of a plot of land in the Lurt Mountains, due to the unexpected discovery of a gold mine, has caused land prices to skyrocket, and this has caused some problems. The blonde gentleman smiles and says that they are already so close to the finish line, and then asks when they will organize the ceremony to start construction. The assistant explains that they will do this immediately after the founding of the state, because they have been working towards this for a very long time, and it already feels like the end is coming soon. Several days have passed since the main character arrived in Floria. She remembers what the Duke said to make her feel at home. The gentleman claimed that it was he who brought her here, and therefore she need not worry about expenses. The little girl believes that this place can truly be called heaven on earth. Klitsia begins to worry that she has wasted too much time because she does not understand why there is still no reply letter. The girl reflects on the fact that her father should have received her message long ago. Suddenly, a stranger hands the girl an umbrella and says that it is very bright today. The gentleman asks if she wants to take shelter from the sun, and the lady, surprised, asks if they have never met before. The man says that he thinks this is their first meeting, and the little girl thinks that he is incredibly handsome, but she doesn't understand why his face seems familiar to her. Klitsia reflects that while the Duke of the North is characterized by black hair and red eyes, this man is blessed with the royal combination of yellow and blue. The girl thought that she really only likes the image of the Duke. The handsome man asks if she is resting or alone, and the girl answers that it is not so. The little girl looked at the gentleman and thought that she would not give in, but he fed her ice cream with a spoon and asked if she liked the local dishes. The main character reflects on the fact that her heart belongs exclusively to black-haired handsome men. However, they agreed to meet again. The young lady tells the Duke about how she spent the day, and that the stranger even said that he would come for her himself. He thinks that the lady is having a good time. Tom reports that considering that she met that man for the first time, and she asks in surprise what he means, because she doesn't understand what he's talking about. Klitsia thinks that it is all because the Duke is too busy to have fun and relax together, and she asks if he is jealous. The little girl, smiling, wonders if this is something of a love confrontation between light and dark. Hearing this, the guy thought that it was true. Tom quickly escorts the girl out of the office and asks for forgiveness, because he needs to work in silence. The Duke realizes that he has had very little free time in recent days. The guy thought that even though he had deviated from their joint vacation under various pretexts, he still felt unpleasant because he didn't understand why she was so careless. The Duke ponders whether it is possible to meet random men so easily, since she also said that he is the only ideal. The man understands that, according to the laws of cliché, the great Duke of the North realizes his feelings too late, and the bright knight who challenges him is a new fashionable trend of the entire genre. Tom thinks that the only thing that matters to the little ones is that the man is handsome. He asks Milady if she was interested in the purpose of the man's visit to the island. The girl explains that he only said that he wanted to restore his health and that he even had the title of Duke, but he didn't say anything else about himself. Hearing this, the gentleman, surprised, asserts that there should have been no titles higher than Count left in the Empire, and then asks if she has heard about the Great Purge. The main character believes that he is a foreigner, and purely formally the ruler of Floria also bears the title of Duke, and asks if this is true. Hearing this, the Duke does not understand why the hell this happened. He wondered if this was too suspicious, because he knows that he cannot trust anyone. That night, the Duke had a dream that a fair-haired gentleman touched his face and asked if he knew his name, and then said that he was the last offspring. The guy said that his name was John Furza, and the man replied that this was correct and asked if he was the son of Arya, and said that his mother was Athena's half-sister. The gentleman says that it turns out that they are cousins. Hearing this, the black-haired guy pounced on him with a sword and asks him not to make him laugh. The boy asks Jan how he dares, and then claims that he will pay for what he did. The young emperor says that it seems that talking to him now is useless. Jan looked at the guy and said that he would give him time to cool down and suggested that he come when he heals the scar, because he has something to discuss. At this time, Tom woke up and realized that it was just a dream, and then grabbed his leg and said that, "Damn Jan Furza." Eugene's godfather Homar apologizes for not having time to prepare a proper reception, because he did not expect that he would have to receive guests from the palace early in the morning. Acting Emperor Isaac decides to pay a visit to the Rurikan family, and in doing so, he suddenly surprises the owner of the house. Count Owen Miri is the youngest graduate of the Imperial Academy, and, as an advisor to the emperor, he also holds the title of the brightest mind of the century. The man thought that since Owen Miri himself was accompanying him, it meant that he was truly an important person. The owner understands that they came without any warning, citing the imperial decree. Homer watches the man vigilantly and does not understand what is happening here, and assumes that after that incident there was a leak. However, he knows that he carefully replaced all their traces. Isaac explains that the issue is that his son ran away with his daughter and thinks that maybe as fathers they could resolve it. Hearing this, the owner was surprised, because he realized that this girl with red hair, who was at his house, and then screaming, said that his daughter seduced him. Homer claims that from his early childhood, he raised Toma with such care, sensibly and prudently, and all just for the sake of his slob taking him away. Isaac, hearing this, screams and asks if he said that his daughter is a slob, and then explains that she has her own style and natural beauty. The Viscount believes that his daughter would not be the first to seduce anyone, because he raised her and knows how she behaves. The owner asks if he can imagine how hard it is for him to wake up and immediately hear the news that his son has sailed away with a wanted criminal. Isaac heard this and got angry and screamed that it was his son who took her away. The man claims that it was his daughter who seduced and incited Toma to do this. Miri whispered something in the gentleman's ear, and the Viscount said that some details had just been revealed to him, and then reported that Tom had cancelled all flights and had hastily assembled the crew. Isaac wonders if he ever thought that his son would go that far for love, and the first round of their competition goes in favor of the Viscount. Meanwhile, in Floria, the main character meets the Duke. He explains that he came as he promised earlier, and in his hands was a very beautiful bouquet of flowers. The girl says with delight that these flowers are wonderful, and she likes them very much. She has not yet realized that this is a meeting between Eugene and Jan. At this time, Tom thought that at first he could not believe it, but he realized that this man was Jane Fursa, and then he came up to him and said that it seemed like this was their first meeting and shook his hand. Jan says he's glad to meet you. Tom puts his hand on the girl's shoulder and asks if she'd like to just relax at their estate today. The Duke says that he is sure that the guest has already managed to admire all the local sights, and then asserts that he has the right to invite her friend's villa to his. At this time, a three-way meeting was held. The blonde says that the lady spoke a lot about Mr. Rookin, and believes that, according to her words, the Northern Duke can be completely trusted. Tom says that everything is as it is about him, and that means that he sailed here to restore his health. And then he looked coldly at the man. At this time, the main character does not understand that from the very beginning, there has been some kind of strange atmosphere between these two and believes that this is some kind of confrontation. The young lady thought that this was a love contest between the tyrant and the duke, and that it was a theater of Klitsia's fantasy, and then she began to watch them even more vigilantly. The gentleman asks for forgiveness, because in unfamiliar surroundings, he sometimes gets nervous, and it seems that because of this, his old illness has worsened. Jan turns to Milady and says that if it is not too much trouble, could she buy him a blue hibiscus flower? The emperor says that the disease recedes a little if you brew tea from it. The little girl agrees and screams that she will do it in a moment and then quickly runs away. Jan looked at his opponent and asked what kind of bones he was building here. The duke says it's an old illness and thinks it's a ridiculous reason. The emperor says that 10 years have already passed and he never thought that he would grow up to be a hunter of other people's women. Hearing this, the brunette thought that he should be calm because he wanted to finish him off right here and now. But he understood that until the day of foundation, he had no chance of defeating him. The gentleman understands that he shouldn't make a mess in Floria. Jan says that it's a shame because he told him to come as soon as his scar heals. His Majesty asks if he has forgotten. Tom says the scar is still there and then asks if he overdid it that time. The emperor says that it is strange for him to hear this because he controlled the power then and therefore he would like to take a look. Hearing this, the duke became angry and asked if he had gone mad. The blonde doesn't understand what's wrong, because he'll just look at the scar, and if it's still there, he'll let it go without asking any questions. The duke reminds that he said that there is a scar and says not to touch it. Ian claims that he will only lift his trouser leg and asks why he is so nervous. His Majesty doesn't understand what's wrong with this guy, and then he grabs him and throws him to the floor. He touches his leg and says that he's caught. Jan realized that the scar remained, and at that time, the duke thought that he was just as crazy as before, since he was behaving very boldly. The emperor says that this is truly offensive, since he is his only fat man, and therefore he tries to treat him gently. His Majesty reports that he was forced to kill his father and brothers. Tom, hearing this, suggests that he leave his hypocrisy because he never cared about the rest of the family. The duke claims that he will not forgive him for the death of his mother, and then they begin to compete while lying on the floor, but their strength was equal. At this time, the main character enters the room and screams, asking for forgiveness for being late, because she did not know that buying such a flower would be a problem. Klitsia explains that she went to several different stores, but none had blue hibiscus. However, she was told that red hibiscus has similar properties. Suddenly, the main character realized that there were two men lying on the floor, and this meant a confrontation of a different kind. The duke says that what Milady thought was a misunderstanding and asks for forgiveness. The girl says that it's not a big deal because she also loves this genre, but Tom objects and claims that this is not true at all. At this time, in a luxury 5-star hotel room, Klitsia asks in surprise if they are really saying that right now Clement is with Eugene. The emperor says that the two are living together and that they are closer than he thought. He also says that it seems that Klitsia does not know his true identity. The woman asks in surprise how he just left them there alone. Jan asks how he could have done otherwise, since he has to play the role of the sick duke. His Majesty explains that he has come here to restore his health and asks if this is true. The lady, surprised, asks if she should play along with him. Clarence claims that he arrived in Floria in a hurry to find his wife, and then sent almost the entire crew back, leaving her behind. The woman says that now, instead of trying to return the runaway, all he does is enjoy dates and time spent with her. The emperor explains that he simply wanted to get to know his wife better. His assistant heard this and screamed, claiming that their girl was not their toy. Clarence wonders if he hasn't heard that Klitsia is the youngest knight of the Order of the Red Ice, and that she literally grew up before the eyes of their comrades. His Majesty recalls that she was also a member of that order, and at that time, he thought that she had never contradicted him before. But now she suddenly became so serious. The lady says that she guesses that he left her here because of her origin as a replacement for Isaac, because she is useful to him. The gentleman says that everything is correct and suggests not to be so nervous, because after all, she has good experience and can help him. Clarence argues that he should not disdain this girl, since she strengthened her immunity to poisons with great care and attention. The Duke explains to the main character that this is a big misunderstanding because their guest suddenly staggered and he wanted to catch him but also lost his balance. Hearing this, the girl realized that she had thought of something else and was mistaken. The gentleman claims that apparently she had not understood everything correctly, and the lady says that she has already thought that it is not worth interfering. Tom assures that he was really just trying to help the guest, and the main character smiled and said that she understood and would not tease them anymore. The emperor turns to his subordinate and says that one thing worries him. How will they return her? He needs to check something again. Late in the evening, the young master put a mask on his face and sneaked into the mansion. He thought that the bedroom should be upstairs. The reason why Jan hid his identity when contacting Klitsia was because he wanted to know what the daughter of the Red Lion was like. The meeting with Eugene was a very unexpected turn of events, because the emperor found 2 escaped rabbits at once and considered this an extremely successful trip. The gentleman thought that he was worried that these 2 were in the same bedroom, and that was what he most did not want to see. At this time, the little girl asks the Duke if he doubts her massage skills, and then claims that, by the way, this is a very expensive service. The young gentleman objects and reminds that he said that he was not interested and believes that a lady should not break into someone else's bedroom. Klitsia says that he can deny it as much as he wants, but she understands perfectly well what he feels, and therefore would really like to help him. The girl says that he seemed offended when she started spending a lot of time with another person, and even when a guest arrived, he resisted him. The main character asks what conclusion can be drawn from this and how much he misses her, and then asks if she guessed right. Tom assures that this is not the case at all, and the little girl explains that she came to give him attention and also to help relieve fatigue. The young lady pushed the man onto the bed and then began to knead his back. He asks in surprise if this is really a massage, because it seems to him that something is broken. The girl explains that, of course, everything is fine with him, because this technique is always used by soldiers. And at this time, John does not understand what is going on in the bedroom and what is happening, and therefore wants to take a look. Tom screams and asks her not to massage him so hard, and the lady says that his shoulders are tense and she will fix it now, and therefore asks him to be patient for a little while. The Duke could not stand it any longer, because he understood that this body did not understand what was happening, and then he turned the girl over onto the bed and suggested that she stop with this. Klitsia asks if this is really the second time, and then reminds him that he did the same thing during their first meeting in the palace, and asks if he has forgotten her. The girl claims that the Duke is rapidly increasing his performance and will soon reach 100 points, and then asks if he still wants this. The Duke says that in any case he would like to rest in solitude. Having heard this, the emperor thought that it seemed that he now understood what kind of relationship there was between them. Ian reflects on the fact that he cannot leave without appreciating the skills of his wife that he wanted to learn, and believes that this was an extremely wrong decision. At this time, the main character says goodnight to the Duke, and when she opened the door, she saw a man who was using the rune. The emperor thought that she had a good reaction because she dodged so quickly, and at this time, the girl does not understand how she did not feel him, because he was standing near the door all this time. The young lady believes that this is clearly not another petty thief, because she is well versed in this, having spent her entire childhood on the battlefield. The girl's warrior instinct screamed that she was facing a very formidable enemy, and that in order to survive, she needed to resort to the strongest move. The man realized that she had used an advanced fire rune here in the building. Meanwhile, Tom, lying in bed, does not understand where the rune magic came from. The uninvited guest reflects on the fact that this is not a simple situation, because he could dodge or contact, but this would cause a major commotion. The gentleman understands that then that prince will start causing him problems, and he doesn't care whether he is an emperor or not, because if he violates the ban on conflicts, he will restrict his entry. Jan thought that he himself was not delighted, but he understood that there was no other choice, and he needed to use some technique with 2 fingers. His Majesty took advantage of this option and threw the girl to the floor. When the Duke saw her, he ran because he thought that she had simply fainted. Tom asks the little girl what happened to her, and she apologizes and explains that she missed the attacker and thinks it's her fault. Hearing this, he was surprised because he didn't even think that someone could break in here. I regretted a little that I didn't come out earlier. The main character looked at her hands and told the Duke in surprise that she could not use her magic, and that this was the first time this had happened to her. Rune Morris is the name of the spell that was cast on her, and the Duke tells her about it, and then says that the user needs to draw a star in the air. Rune magic basically draws energy from nature, and its use, unlike magic stones, usually cannot be interrupted. However, Rune Morris is able to forcibly suppress the flow of runic energy, and thus that person protected himself from her fire magic. The Duke says that for now she won't be able to use the rune, but over time the energy will restore itself, and for this she needs a little time. Hearing this, the girl thought about what it meant that her magic would return, and that this was the first time she encountered something like this. The Duke tells Milady to sleep and gain strength, because today was a hard day. Klitsia grabbed Tom by the cloak as he left, and he asked in surprise what was going on. The little girl asks how long he will call her Milady, and then says that she doesn't like it. The main character wonders if they can no longer be considered friends, and therefore suggests simply calling her Klitsia, because she likes it better that way. When the gentleman came to his room, he thought that he should pull himself together and not think about her, because now it was important to establish the identity of the attacker. Tom understands that the Rune Morass spell cannot be mastered by just anyone. To completely block enemy magic, 5 elements must be used at once. These elements include darkness, water, wind, fire, and earth. In other words, the coordinated efforts of 5 experienced magicians at once are necessary. However, in the First Empire, the owners of the runes of darkness and earth have practically disappeared, and the spell of the runes of Morris itself has not been used for at least 100 years. There is only one person on the entire continent who could use this technique alone, and the 5-element mage is Jan Furza. And he had paid them a visit before. The Duke thought that he probably wanted to check the situation, and now he left a warning. However, he does not understand how he knows this spell. Tom thinks that he needs to calm down, because the plan doesn't change, and Jan Furse will be immersed in eternal sleep until the end of this year, and maybe sooner. The next day, when the Duke saw Jan, he thought that this bastard had no conscience at all, and then he greeted him and said that he had already looked in on them at night. Tom wonders if he has a lot of free time to wander around, and the Emperor asks if he is confusing something, and explains that yesterday he definitely came to them during the day, and not at night. His Majesty claims that he has a prior agreement with the lady, and that is why he has come. Tom says that he is very sorry, but she is not feeling well today, and he will have to leave. The gentleman explains that last night a crazy bastard broke into their home, but suddenly the main character appears and addresses the Duke. Tom asks Milady in surprise if she feels better already, and then asks when she managed to change her clothes. The girl says that it seems to her that it was already light when she woke up. Klitsia asks if she looks well, and Jan assures her that she is simply wonderful. Tom wishes them a good time and leaves, but John turns to the Duke of the North and asks why they shouldn't join him, because today he wanted to tell Milady something, and he thinks that Tom should hear it too. These words interested the Duke, and he decided to keep them company, and then they came to a very good restaurant and ordered lunch. Tom became interested in what this emperor had in mind, but he decided to remain silent and say nothing. Jan turns to Milady and asks if she has heard of a man named Eugene. Klitsia assures that of course she heard, because he is one of the princes of the Servan Empire, and as far as she knows, at one point this scoundrel was already in the hands of their emperor. The girl wonders why Jan just let him go, and then says that her father was very angry about it. The blonde wonders if her father is Viscount Isaac, because he knows him as a good man. The main character explains that she never understood why they needed to start this war at all, because the very thought makes her feel uneasy. The little girl thinks that, after all, Emperor Servan and his children are birds of a feather, and then asks if that's true. Jan reports that he is now walking around somewhere freely. Klitsia angrily says that it would be worthwhile to finally catch him before this scoundrel does any more harm. Hearing this, the handsome man smiled, because he could no longer hold back his laughter. His Majesty claims that she is right, and the Emperor should have dealt with him on the spot, because he believes that he made a mistake, then that now needs to be corrected. Hearing this, the Duke thought about taking this Jan away, because he had recently played the role of a weak and sick duke, and then asked the duke if he was from the Firt's empire. The handsome man agrees with him and says that it is so. Hearing this, the little girl thinks that she was mistaken in calling him a duke and does not understand why he did not correct her. The girl asks if he knows about the Great Purge, and then tells him that His Majesty once destroyed all the bearers of titles higher than Count. The handsome man suggests not to worry about him. The main character asks him in surprise if he is sure about this, and then, screaming, says that their emperor can sometimes be a real psycho. Klitsia says that her father served His Majesty for a long time, and every time the conversation turned to the emperor, he began to turn pale with fear. The little girl suggests just imagining how scary this man is. And right now, she can't return to Furza precisely because of the emperor. The girl says that he is a very wise ruler, but you shouldn't catch his eye if he holds a sword in his hands, because there are rumors that he once slaughtered a bunch of nobles right in the throne room. Handsome thinks that perhaps he did not want to leave the traitors alive, but he considers all this to be nothing compared to the massacre on the Carrion Fields, because in that battle, Emperor Furza ended the war. Jan tells Milady that he forgot to mention that the conversation turned to her father and asks if she knew that he was now in the capital. Hearing this, the girl asks in surprise if he knows her father. The man says that he knows him and quite well, and moreover, he has connections with the imperial family. The handsome man asks the little girl why she doesn't return to the capital with him. Hearing this, the duke is surprised and asks why he suddenly decided to do so. Tom at this time thought about whether there was any point in him interfering in this, because all this time he was only Klitsia's companion and not her protector. The man thought that this woman ended up on the island because of the persecution of Jan Furtz. And then he asks if they can no longer be considered friends. The Duke says that he thinks it's really time for her to go back, but he will stay because he still needs to finish some things, and then he will come too. Klitsia, after thinking for a bit, says that she will leave anyway. Hearing this, the blonde suggests not to delay and then gets up from the table. The main character asks in surprise if he wants to sail away now, since they haven't even eaten yet. The man asks if there is a reason to delay, because he understands that it will be better this way. Milady explains that her things are left at the Duke's estate, and the gentleman suggests not to worry because they will send a man to pick them up, and says that it's time for her to go home. At this time, the girl thought that she, of course, understood that she needed to return, but she did not expect that it would happen so suddenly, because she did not even really say goodbye. Klitsia tells the gentleman to wait for her for a minute, and then turns to the Duke of the North and thanks him for all his help, and therefore promises to repay him as soon as he arrives. Tom wishes her an easy path, and only looks after her somehow not happily, because he doesn't want her to leave, because he realized that he really likes her. The superfast ship Hermes is equipped with a magical engine of the highest power, embodying the technology of the continent. This engineering genius is capable of covering a distance in just 3 hours that would take other sailing ships a whole week to cover. He is rightfully considered the fastest king of the empire, and upon hearing this, the main character says in surprise that it is simply incredible how fast this ship is. The emperor asks if she likes it, and she on the left says with delight that he has never been on such a big and fast ship, and then asks if it really belongs to him. The girl says that he has both beauty and money and considers him a lucky man. Hearing this, the man thanked him and then said that he had a very good income. Ian reports that he is not deprived of influence. The little girl thought that such phrases usually cause disgust, but he really is an impressive person. The emperor says that therefore, perhaps, he could influence even her problems with the imperial family, and at that time thought that he had made the right decision. Tom understands that this issue should be resolved peacefully, and therefore there is no need to wind himself up with unnecessary thoughts, since this is bad form. Suddenly, an old man turns to the gentleman and says that he did not expect to meet Mr. Eugene in such a place and at such a time. Hearing this, the young gentleman asks in surprise how he dares to call his name so unceremoniously, and how he barely survived the Xena disaster and now dared to come to him. Tom thinks that it seems that a long life has taught him nothing. Hearing this, the old man cries out and turns to His Majesty and asks if he is really going to turn away from Xena. The Duke says in surprise that he doesn't seem to understand the situation, and then asks who allowed those idiots to carry out that crazy operation. The man claims that they themselves are to blame for allowing the organization to be destroyed, and it seems that they are still planning to implement their special plan. The old man thinks that he knows that John Furza has just left Floria, and asks if this is true, and then throws the hammer on the floor and claims that it is all over. The man offers to find out once and for all who truly serves the great empire of Servan, and then claims that this Jan will never set foot on the continent again. Suddenly, the main character saw something suspicious and asked the Duke what was going on because she was very scared and also wondered if it would explode. At this time, the Emperor thought that perhaps, due to the pleasant atmosphere, he had relaxed too much and perhaps had not even been as vigilant as he should have been. After all, the most powerful and influential man in the Furza Empire is also the man with the greatest number of enemies, no matter where he is or what he does. This man never has the right to forget that there is a knife at his throat. His Majesty assumes that they have overloaded the control unit of the magical engine. The Emperor believes that everything here will soon explode, and therefore he made a mistake, because he should have carried out an even more thorough check. The gentleman understands that the one who did this was very naive in believing that he could be removed with such a pathetic attempt, because such mechanisms can be easily destroyed, and he used his rune. At this time, the main character, using magic, screams and claims that she will destroy him right now. They suddenly realized that the activated runes can no longer be undone. When two different advanced runes collide, a powerful explosion occurs, but the lords realized this very late. Clarence asks in surprise what happened, and then asks if everything is okay with that girl. After all, at that time, Clarence was sailing on an accompanying ship. In a few minutes, the Emperor, holding the girl under his arm, walked ashore. And a few hours ago, moments before the terrible explosion, using the wind rune, Yang created a protective barrier. In this way, the gentleman distorted the shockwave, and at that moment, Klitsia realized that the person was capable of using at least 2 different runes at an advanced level. The girl realized that this man with blonde hair and blue eyes, who called himself close to the imperial family of the Duke, was none other than Emperor Furza himself. At this time, Jan thought that everything had gone wrong, but he understood that first he needed to save the girl, because that was the most important thing now. The Duke asks Milady why she is sailing away, and at that time, the girl thought that if she is caught, she will be accused of insulting the Emperor. The main character believes that in the worst case, they will charge her with attempted murder, and this is equivalent to the death penalty, and then she starts to swim even faster. Jan turns to the girl and asks her to wait, but she does not stop, and he screams and says that if she continues to swim away, she will be sentenced to execution. The gentleman suggests the woman to calm down and then grabs her, and together they reached the shore and then rested. The witches were very tired since the path was not close. Klitsia addresses His Majesty and then uses the rune and quickly lights the fire. Jan suggests that she relax and think better about what she will do next. The little girl explains that at dawn, she could explore the surroundings and look for housing, and then says that she will start right now, but admits that it will hardly be of any use. The handsome guy says that he thinks they are on a desert island. Upon hearing this, the girl was surprised because she realized that this was a big problem. At this time, Ryan successfully completed his business trip to Shumarin and returned to the capital a few weeks later. He became interested in why all the running around. The assistant asks in surprise if Sir Ryan has returned, and then greets him. The gentleman asks in surprise what brought Sir Isaac to the capital, since he did not expect to see him. At this time, the young gentleman thought that as far as he remembered, the Viscount had declared that he would never come here. The secretary explained everything to him. Ryan realized that his brother had personally gone to Floria to bring back Lady Megerino. The Viscount explains that all the tasks that His Majesty gave him were completed. Miri says that he hopes that with his arrival, the work will go easier. But suddenly, Sir Ryan turns around and leaves, and the assistant asks in surprise where he ran. Count Miri realized that the gentleman had used the rune because he had disappeared in a few minutes, and they became interested in why he had done this. On the first day on the desert island, the Emperor used the rune and made sure that there was no land or other islands nearby. Jan understands that it is difficult to determine how far they have deviated from course, but he knows that there is also no way to contact the capital. The gentleman believes that he needs to urgently figure out how to get out of here, because he understands that they will look for him, but it is not known in what direction. At this time, the main character shows the boa constrictor and says that they needed breakfast. The man asks in surprise if they should look for some fruits. However, the girl objects and says that it is much better to eat meat in the morning to have strength, and then suggests that he wait patiently because she cooks it very tasty. The emperor says that now they should think about how to get off the island, and the girl reminds him that he said that this island is uninhabited. Klitsia wonders if they might not get out and not contact anyone, and the gentleman says that's exactly it. She asks what if they're stuck there forever. The man says that he believes that they will spend the rest of their lives together. Upon hearing this, the girl was surprised that she would have to be with His Majesty for the rest of her life. The gentleman asks in surprise if she is upset. The girl claims that she is not, and suggests that she has fallen into the genre of imprisonment. The little girl thought for a bit and then objected, and explained that, objectively speaking, no one was holding her captive, and therefore confinement was not appropriate. The lady says that usually this genre involves a dungeon or, at the very least, a bedroom. The man thought that this woman seemed more and more strange to him. The emperor realizes that she has built a shelter for the night very quickly and is a good hunter, and he must admit that her survival skills are impressive. Jan reflects that, moreover, she knows about the 3 lines of smoke that signal the need for rescue, and believes that perhaps her father taught her everything. At this time, the main character was busy thinking about what genre it was, adventure survival or just survival, because she couldn't choose. Suddenly, the young ladies heard a sound and saw a ship in the distance, and assumed that they had noticed a distress signal. Klitsia started screaming and waving her hand that they were here, and the emperor thought that it looked like luck had smiled on them, because not even a day had passed, and they were already rushing to help. When the ship approached, they saw the flag of the pirates. The man says that in front of them is the majestic ship of John Furza, following the testament of the great pirate king John. The captain claims that they are ready to support them without any conditions or discrimination, and that they will be grateful to the mercy of their great pirate king. Hearing this, His Majesty was surprised and said that this was something new. After all, from the moment he ascended the throne, they tried to overthrow and humiliate him many times. The emperor says something about someone using his name without his knowledge, and what's more, it's some kind of dirty gang of pirates. The little girl tells him not to be upset and explains that they are not pirates at all, but refugees, and they are good people. He asks in surprise how she knows this. Klitsia explains that she bought this ship with His Majesty's money and gave it to good people. Hearing this, the man was surprised, and at that time, the girl showed him a black card. Jan asks in surprise what she was thinking when she did this. The girl explains that in the first letter, he himself wrote that she was entitled to generous compensation. The little girl explains that's why she thought the card would cover all the expenses. He says the girl never even received the money. The emperor does not understand how she can spend her money on refugees who have no connection to her. She explains that all these people have lost their homes because of the war. The man says he understands that it is impossible to make everyone happy, and the little girl says that at least she wants there to be fewer hungry and wandering people in the world. The main character claims that she is sure that His Majesty would also like this, and therefore asks not to order the execution, because she will try to return all the money. The emperor says that she is a trouble magnet, but still there is a desire to get her. Hearing this, the little girl was surprised, and at this time, the man who was sailing on the boat reports that they are sailing closer. Seeing them, the girl screaming, says that they are already close. Milady says that there are 2 of them, and at this time, the emperor takes her by the waist and says that now it is his turn to shout. The man took the girl in his arms, and with the help of the rune, they moved to the ship. Seeing this, all the people were surprised because they realized that it was the emperor himself. The captain explains that this is the crew of the pirate king Furzi, and His Majesty asks if he can consider himself the captain of their ship. People began to scream that the pirate king had descended from the heavens, and even the heroine with him, and then they began to greet their masters. The leader of the ship greets the pirate king and says that he always believed that one day he would visit his people, and they were really looking forward to it. In a few minutes, the assistant brought the Pirate King's hat, the Pirate King's belt and cloak, and then says that this is the complete Pirate King set. The main character looked at this handsome man, how he was dressed, and thought that he liked it, because his light hair became even lighter under the hat. The girl says that it is funny, not bad at all, because these people know how to please the king. The man orders everyone to entertain the Pirate King. The boy asks His Majesty to allow him to show him his talent, because he can ride a unicycle and juggle at the same time. And another boy says that he can hold a plate on his head, and an old woman claims that she can predict fate. Having heard this, the girl became interested in whether it was true, and the woman claims that it is, because you can find out everything from the line on your hand. The old woman took Milady's hand and called her a respected heroine, and then said that this line promises unexpected wealth. Hearing this, the main character screams and asks what to do since it is true, and then asks if she can see her destiny in love. The emperor says that he almost forgot, and then asks to put the card on the table. The old woman says that a wonderful union is definitely waiting for her. Klitsia wonders if it will be the Northern Duke, and the woman says that a moment of happiness will be followed by a long shadow of loss. The old woman does not understand why her thread of life is connected with someone who is no longer alive. Hearing this, the little girl does not know how to understand it, and asks if she will marry a dead man. The woman says that she can now see the fate line of the Pirate King, and the little girl asks for one more minute, and only one. The witch says that fate is such that it cannot be changed, and the connections and life of each of them depend on the great wheel of fate. The woman claims that the established future is unchangeable. At this time, the main character thought that something was familiar to her. The emperor says that he refuses because he does not recognize fortune-telling. Hearing this, the old woman became upset because she thought that she was useless to him. Jan wrote a letter and attached it to the pigeon's leg, and then let it fly. He understands that it is about 2 hours' journey to the base in the Strait of Bon. The sailor reports that the course has been changed as ordered, and the captain praised them and said that they were great. The man suggests that everyone be careful because the Pirate King is giving the order. When all the people gathered on deck, the captain said that the young people should go to the right and the old people to the left. The little girl looked at him and didn't understand what he was doing, but she didn't ask. The main character believes that, whatever the case, it doesn't look like he's going to return to the ship. The sailor asks the respected heroine if she is hot today because there is no wind and offers her a drink of water. Klitsia tells him not to worry about her because she is not so great that they call her a heroine. He asks in surprise how she is not great and then claims that this is not true at all. The man says that life is rejected and despised, and thanks to them, he has found peace for the first time. The girl explains that this ship was bought by His Majesty the King of the Pirates. The young lady understands that this was not his will, but her role was only to persuade him. However, the sailor claims that she, a respected heroine, was at the origins. The man thinks that they are both great benefactors, but suddenly hears that the sorting is now complete, and then follows an announcement. The captain reports that the crew of the John Furza have been using his protection carelessly up until this point, and if that were all it took, it could be called a humanitarian mission. Jan asks how they dare to call themselves pirates, of such a large pirate ship calmly sailing in their waters, and even with respect to him as the king of pirates. At this time, the pigeon flew to its destination, the Bourbon Naval Base. When the man read the letter, he screamed and asked what it was. The captain does not understand how this could be a personal order of the emperor, and he became interested in whether this order was real. The commander of the Bourbon Base, Admiral Wilson, asks why His Majesty gave such an order, because he does not understand anything. At this time, the emperor turns to his subordinates and announces that from now on, under his leadership, they will all become real pirates. The woman looks at the students and thinks that her name is Embert, and at 17, she has become a sage and therefore will not tolerate the desecration of holy science. The professor asks who dared to read novels in her class, and then tells her that the book is being confiscated. She starts reading it herself and gets carried away by the book. The maid turns to the master and says that if he is uncomfortable lying around doing nothing, she asks if he would like to read a book, because in her opinion, it is very interesting. Miri claims that such novels are not interesting to him and would rather read the book he brought. And at that time, he looked at the surprised maids and realized that everyone was saying that he was the strangest. Ryan approaches the professor and says he has a question, and then wonders how two dukes could fall in love with the same girl with red hair and golden eyes. The gentleman asks how this story would end. The woman says that if there are heroes with black hair and golden hair, then the heroine must be a blonde. Baron of the Black Coast of Bourbon and Admiral of the Fleet Percy Wilson, who for many years protected the waters of Percy. He was one of the most loyal confidants of the Emperor. The Admiral despised these parasites of the seas, the pirates, more than anything else. He does not understand why he is ordered to arm the pirate ship that will arrive at the Bourbon base. Wilson claims that he will not give these pirate bastards a single potato. The assistant heard this and did not understand how this was possible, because it was an imperial decree. The admiral believes that His Majesty would never have given such an absurd order, and believes that it is most likely a forgery, since someone imitated the emperor's handwriting. The man suggests that perhaps the emperor was forced to write this under threat. Suddenly, the captain announces that a pirate ship is approaching them. The assistant reports that, judging by its size, it is a giant sailing ship, and there is confirmation that it has a magical engine installed on it. Hearing this, the admiral was surprised, because he thought it was simply unbelievable, and he was wondering if the decree was really real. Wilston thought about the small fish swimming into the shark's mouth, and then ordered all troops to prepare their ships for combat readiness. The man shouts out that their goal is the safe rescue of His Majesty, and then states that it is time to show the power of the Navy. When the Emperor came ashore, he asked what kind of rescue they were talking about, since no one had kidnapped him, and he thought that this was an excellent fantasy of the Admiral. Jan says that if this continues, he will become an emperor killed by his loyal general. The assistants do not understand how this can happen. The captain says that he never imagined that he would live to see the day when he would see how a pirate ship was armed. The admiral turns to His Majesty and says that he does not dare to doubt his wisdom, but believes that supporting the pirates with weapons is not the best idea. Whiston says that, judging by the state of their ship, the crew seems completely untrained, because if you give them a weapon, they won't understand how to use it, let alone fight. The Emperor agrees with him and claims that he is right, and then says that they have two problems. The First Fleet is now too weak to deal with the pirates. The Admiral says that after the victory, they slightly expanded their territory, but barely had time to defend the surrounding waters, because they needed to spread out. Jan claims that his second resignation is his own. The man says that it is really time for him to give way to the younger generation. The Emperor asks if he knows how to solve both problems at once, because he believes that this can be done. The Admiral asks in surprise if this is possible, and His Majesty takes off his hat and places it on his head, then announces that from today on, he will become the king of the pirates. Hearing this, everyone was very surprised, and the Emperor claims that this is an order, and Sir Wilson must board the ship and train the people he has selected. His Majesty explains that the Admiral must train them to rob pirates, because an eye for an eye is a pirate against a pirate. Great Jan Furza, this ship will become the first privateer vessel in the history of the continent of Asha, under the patronage of the Emperor. These warriors, who were refugees until recently, will now become heroes of the seas and will be commanded by the legendary one-eyed Captain Nile. However, this story is waiting for its time. The main character says that they finally returned to the capital, which came to her soul. The girl saw her father and was very happy, and he, surprised, asked his daughter what she had done. Klitsia explains that if he had not blocked her accounts, everything could have turned out differently, and there would not have been such a commotion and such confusion. The secretary informs His Majesty that an urgent message has arrived from Lord Clarence, and then informs him that there has been an explosion, and then asks what happened. Miri says that they were about to send a search party to the Bourbon base if there had been no news by yesterday, but he heard that the explosion was not powerful enough to pose a threat. The Emperor suggests to first deal with the most important thing, which is his runaway bride, and then he announces that this fugitive is the current empress. His Majesty's aides say she is wanted for escape and fraud after she forged his name to open a joint account. Jan screams and says that this is enough, and then says that they have a lot to discuss, but they will start with the main thing, and before new obstacles appear, he wants to get a divorce immediately. Hearing this, the main character does not understand why she suddenly became scared. And Miri thought that finally the matter was moving towards the end. His Majesty gathered his subordinates in the conference hall of the Empire, and then announced that they would skip the formalities because everything was simple, and asked the lady if she also agreed to a divorce. Jan suggests writing this down on a magic stone, and everyone keeping silent, because he will agree to all her conditions and anything she wants. Miri turns to His Majesty and asks for forgiveness for the sudden intervention, and then informs him that they cannot get a divorce. The Emperor's secret lover, 3 years ago, they overcame their status differences for the sake of love. Lavish gifts, including a luxurious magical ship, and they don't understand where the money came from. Even the Emperor's closest confidants knew nothing, and they became interested in whether the Empress of Persia would soon be declared. Miri gives the order not to let anyone into the meeting room. After reading this newspaper, the Emperor asks in surprise who this informant or journalist is. The secretary explains that it has not yet been possible to establish this, and security is already dealing with this issue. The little girl asked in surprise if it was possible to simply explain everything as it is. The girl suggests saying that it was all just a mistake in the documents, because of which they were listed as married. Miri believes that this is not just an article from the gossip section. The Count says that the mistake in registering the marriage occurred exactly 3 years ago, and the article clearly states that he started dating exactly then. The secretary claims that, in addition, it is hinted that the gifts were paid for from the imperial budget, and that this article was probably written by someone close to the court. Miri assumes that this is done in order to deliberately undermine the emperor's reputation, and if the divorce is completed now, they will blow the situation out of proportion. The secretary believes that it will look as if the emperor secretly brought in a new empress and then hastily kicked her out, and in the future, it will be difficult to hush up the matter. Klitsia understands that the situation is serious, and she will have to stay in the capital until everything calms down. She does not understand why she has some strange premonition. The girl thinks that it will not be easy at all. Clarence says that it looks like the information did not leak through the banks, because the head of the bank does not look like a person who would gossip. The head of the bank assured that none of the transactions could have been viewed by outsiders. The secretary suggests starting a search of the editorial office of the daily newspaper. The emperor orders that only the most reliable people be taken, and that the number be reduced to a minimum. Clarence believes that if you act too obviously, it will arouse suspicion. The woman understands that scandals around His Majesty happen almost every day, but people do not take it seriously, reading it as ordinary gossip. Clarence remembered that she once asked the emperor whether it was worth reacting to false rumors, and he said that it made no difference, because if he ignored them, they would disappear on their own. The woman claims that this is why everything has remained the same until now. But this time, it is not a matter of fiction, and the situation is ambiguous. The emperor says that he has a different premonition, because all this happened a week before the founding of the empire, and suggests that perhaps some organization is behind this. His Majesty wishes to initiate an investigation among the treasury and the administrative services. Clarence says that she understands. Meanwhile, Tom asks in surprise if this data is reliable. Luke assures that it was verified by a reliable source. The gentleman understands that this means that the cruiser on which the lady and the emperor were exploded and flew into pieces, and they were saved by pirates from Yanfursa. Luke assures that this is the case, and therefore he will not be surprised if the gentleman does not believe it, because he himself has checked several times. Tom says he believes it, because when that woman is involved, everything goes wrong. Brunette believes that if we are to believe what he confessed, the engine explosion was not strong enough to destroy the ship. The Duke does not understand why this ship failed, and why the vessel was completely destroyed, and then asks if he honestly told what he did. Luke claims that at first, he thought that he simply would not listen to orders anymore, and the gentleman thinks that he did not answer of his own free will, and then asks if he has ever seen this symbol and shows it. The secretary asks in surprise what kind of embroidery is on the handkerchief, because he has never seen anything like it before. Tom explains that the old man who carried out the sabotage was watching the situation from the pier, and he says that someone in red clothes handed him this handkerchief. The gentleman understands that it is necessary to find out who it was, and the secretary says that of course he will take care of it. Luke looked closely at the handkerchief, and it seemed to him that he had seen this symbol somewhere before. Tom says that there is only a week left until the celebration of the Empire's Foundation Day, and they spent more time in Floria than they expected. The woman says that she is still impressed because the president of Percy's largest company, Toma Holdings, turned out to be such a young and charismatic person. Tom reports that he is surprised that she is the largest landowner in Rilt, and also such an elegant lady. The man believes that now everything depends on her last step, because as soon as she signs, the deal will be completed. Madame says that this is an extremely profitable deal for her, but she is still, of course, worried about Mr. Riken. Rilta mountains are barren and dangerous lands, and even tourists don't go there. The woman reports that when he said he was going to build a resort in the area, she thought he wanted to buy cheap land and make something worthwhile out of it. The lady claims that gold was recently discovered there, and prices have increased 2 or 3 times, and despite this, he insists on that particular plot and its size. Tom asks if she has changed her mind about the deal. She assures him that, of course, it hasn't. The woman claims that the gentleman is successful in everything he does, and so she thought that maybe he had a brilliant idea that she could join. The Marquise reports that this land was still a burden for her, since there was no gold vein there. Tom suddenly saw a handkerchief near the lady's hand and asked if he could ask about the symbol on this handkerchief. The woman asks if he is also interested in the Church of Happiness. She explains that it is the state religion of Persia, and it is a cult creation. The lady says that it is fashionable now, because all serious people who know a thing or two about money are already there. Madame says that she will reveal to him a little secret, because the man who brought her to the Church of Happiness is a real giant in society. The lady says that this is Prince Eugene Finner himself, the last heir of the vanished Empire of Servan, and he is one of the highest members of the Church of Happiness. Hearing this, the young gentleman was surprised, because he did not know what a strange turn of events would be. Tom asks Madame in surprise if she's sure about this, because as far as he knows, Eugene Venir disappeared after the war with Servan. The woman claims that she personally saw everything with her own eyes, and that he was also introduced to her when she entered the Church of Happiness. Madame says that Mr. Riken also has black hair and red eyes, and he looks so much like Mr. Eugene. The lady says that if he wants, she can introduce him to her, because the descent ceremony will begin soon. Luke, surprised, asks if he really wants to meet him right away, and thinks it would be safer if they investigated first. However, the gentleman claims that black hair and red eyes are rare, and he may be a member of the royal family of Servan. The secretary reminds that all members of the royal family except him died during the war with John Fursa. Tom suggests that there may still be surviving relatives, or perhaps it is someone from the distant relatives on the mother's side. Luke says that if this is his distant relative, then he asks what he is going to do. The gentleman says that they will look, but first he will ask what he wants, because he is very interested in what kind of person he is. The secretary realized that his boss always lost his cool when it came to his mother. Luke knows that Tom's real goal is not to restore Servan, but to take revenge on Jan Furzi, especially for his mother. A man with black hair and red eyes claims to be Eugene Wiener, and then asks if they were looking to meet him. At this time, the young gentleman thought that he did not look like him at all, and knew that even at first glance, it was clear that this was dyed hair. The man says that judging by the expression on their faces, they doubt, and then reminds them that at the beginning, many doubt. The gentleman says that once he shows the power available only to the royal family of Servan, everything will fall into place. Anyone in Pers knows that runic magic is divided into 5 elements: water, wind, fire, earth, and darkness. The runes of darkness are a power available only to members of the royal family of Servan. And then the man asks how much they know about the runes of darkness. The man in the white jacket says that they do not summon pillars of fire or lightning from the clear sky, but they can control the mind, memories, and feelings of a person. The gentleman says that this is the most powerful force for fighting people, and then announces that the demonstration is over. And the guy with dyed hair asks if they believe him now. Tom thought for a moment and then turned to his secretary and suggested that they leave the office. Luke agreed, and when he found himself behind the door, he thought that somehow this was all suspicious. And at this time, the man does not understand what is wrong with this person, because after contact with the rune of darkness, people usually lose their minds. The man does not understand why this gentleman is so calm, and this teases him a little. At this time, Tom reflects on the fact that now he understands why this man was believed. The young master says that it is believed that the runes of darkness are only available to the royal family of Servan, but he knows that in fact, such abilities are found in others. Tom claims that most people like him can only fake rune magic, because the people of Penza have never seen real runes, so deception is easy. Hearing this, the man asked in surprise what he was talking about, and at that time, the gentleman showed his rune and asked if he felt it. Tom claims that it is difficult for him to even keep his eyes open because the fear seems to be tearing his heart apart. The gentleman says that this is a real rune of darkness, and then says that now it is his turn to ask questions. Tom wonders what the Church of Happiness is, and what the descent ceremony is. At this time, Luke, standing behind the door, thought that his master should control the power. Tom asks why he is pretending to be Eugene, and offers to tell him everything he knows. At this time, Miri explains that for now, this is all they have managed to find out, since the identity of the journalist who wrote the article and the informant from the palace are already known. The emperor says that they are both currently absent from the capital. The assistant reports that the journalist has completely disappeared, and the finance minister's employee has recently taken an extended vacation. The advisor says they have one thing in common, and they both actively promoted the Church of Happiness. Hearing this, Ryan is surprised and asks if civil servants can change their state religion. The minister says that His Majesty has allowed freedom of religion, and then says that they asked why a man was taking a holiday in the middle of a holiday. The Marquis explains that he said that he was holding an important event in the north, and this turned out to be strange, because he does not understand what kind of organization is organizing holidays that overheat with the Foundation Day. The gentleman asks in surprise what the Church of Happiness does. Miri explains that according to their data, this is a new religion that appeared a few years ago, and they will bring happiness to everyone because they believe in the power of happiness. Clarence asks in surprise what kind of stupid slogan this is, and Miri explains that they have many temples all over the empire. The secretary says that they are involved in charity and donate money, but the cult of creation clearly does not approve of this. Ryan wonders where they get the money from, because he understands that they need a lot of resources to promote this faith. Luke asks the gentleman if everything went smoothly. Tom thinks that everything is fine, and then says that when he comes to, he will not remember anything. The secretary asks for forgiveness, and then says that he only now remembered that he saw the symbol of the Church of Happiness on the badges of several noblemen. And the gentleman asks if there are any results from the interrogation, because when he comes to his senses, Tom will declare a desire to join the Church of Happiness. A man thinks that if he says that he is interested in learning and wants to sacrifice, the reaction will be quick. The secretary asks in surprise what he has in mind, and the gentleman explains that he wants to study this religion more deeply. At this time, the girl put on a soldier's uniform and then said that her name was Klitsia Mejerino. The baby says that she used to live in a secluded place called Shumarin, but now she is in the imperial castle. One day, out of the blue, a young lady became the empress of the Penza Empire, and it is because of this that she has to go through hell. The main character thought that after all the events, they would finally get divorced, but problems arose within the emperor's family. Miri says she can confirm that the only person who contacted reporters was an official from a department in the Ministry of Finance. The secretary thinks it would be better to postpone the issue of divorce until the investigation is completed and remain in the castle, hiding his identity. At this time, the girl thought that these were difficult words because she was not sure what was happening, but it seemed that they were telling her to stay here and not go anywhere. Thus, Klitsia disguised herself as an imperial guard because she thought that a young girl walking around the castle would arouse a lot of suspicion. About a week has passed since then, and the main character was very bored because she couldn't even move from the spot if she wanted to. The emperor told her to remain quiet because his family was busy preparing for the ceremony to mark the founding of the empire. The gentleman says that after the ceremony, public interest will die down, and therefore he believes that there is no point in trying so hard to disguise it. Jan called the girl Sasha, and upon hearing this, she said that she had never told him her nickname. The young lady claims that it meant that those detectives were His Highness, and then remembers that the hair and eye color was different. The emperor says that she quickly figured it out and asks her not to tell anyone about what happened then. The girl asks if he forgot anything, and then reminds her that he said that if they meet again, he will buy her meat. Klitsia wonders why she never saw the meat, because she was very hungry then and believed him. In a few minutes, the table was covered with very tasty meat dishes, and their quantity varied. The maid says that from now on, only meat will be served at all meals, and this is an order from His Majesty. At this time, the guards thought that something was being hidden from them, since this was the first time they had such a laid table. The main character thought that she could live in the emperor's family, and it was worth it. The foundation of the empire was told in an ancient legend. The great dragon Asha promised to make a covenant with people. In Perds, the most grandiose festival is held in honor of this, and all the inhabitants of the empire celebrate. 10 years ago, after the victory at Servant, this was also a celebration of victory. An imperial ball is being held to which VIPs from all over the continent are invited. They say that the dancing and singing there did not stop for a whole week, and the main character lived in remote Shumarin, and this did not particularly affect her. Many ladies dream of receiving an invitation to the ball of the founding of the empire, because not everyone can get there. Klitsia understands that she is from a completely different world, and thinks that it would be much more interesting for her to sit in her room and read new editions of the Grand Duke of the North. The girl understands that the imperial family is really busy preparing for their ceremony, because she has not seen any of them. Suddenly, the main character saw Amber, who came from the academy with the girls. The young lady understands that the professor has arrived with a group of members of the Northern Academic Society. Klitsia asks in surprise how they ended up in the capital, and especially in the palace. The headmistress says that now is the time for the Northern Academic Community Seminar. The woman says that the new member of the society, Leon, has officially invited them, and thanks to him, the seminar will be held in the palace. Ryan reports that he understands that the elder Klitsia is the founder of the community and asks if this is true. The main character asks the gentleman what he is planning, because she knows that he doesn't do anything for no reason. Ryan says that it seems like there was a misunderstanding, and he just found out about it now. The gentleman explains that new members are required to attend the seminar, but since he is the head of the guard, he cannot leave the castle and therefore invited them here. The girl says that she has a task, and then says that the emperor orders his betrothed to go to the battlefield where she will definitely die, and asks what he will do. The man says that the correct answer is to stage a coup with the Northern Knights, overthrow the emperor and establish power, and then win the war and offer the position of empress to his betrothed. Hearing this, the young lady was surprised and asked if he was a real member of the community. The girls are surprised to hear that their Klitsia has become an imperial guard and is also friends with the guard commander. The little girl wanted to explain it to them, but didn't know how, and Ryan assures her that she is a guardian knight apprentice. The girls say that it is very elite and cool, and the uniform suits her very well, and then they say that they are happy for their friend. Miri says that the preparations for the ceremony are complete, because all the invited guests have arrived in the country. When the emperor saw Klitsia with the girls, he became interested in who she was with. The secretary says that he heard that this is some kind of community invited by the guard, and it seems that this is the Northern Academic Community. The emperor says that spending time with girls her age is more interesting than living alone in the illegal imperial palace. Miri reports that the order of the ceremony has already been approved, and nothing can be done, and then asks if the emperor doesn't think that revealing the lady's identity is dangerous in a situation where it is unknown what might happen. The gentleman says that while everyone is in their place, he made every effort to ensure that everything went well. The morning of the empire's founding celebration arrived. The main character remembered that 15 years ago she saw Aunt Lance. The girl asks how old she really is because she always looks very good. In response, the woman only smiled. Clarence thought that life is unpredictable, and the Order of the Red Lion made Klitsia the greatest living weapon. The woman knew that the girl had a long way to go to her happiness, and it was very joyful to see her. The main character was at the party with her friends, and they had a really good time, and no one even imagined what would happen at night.